Whoops! I said that entire thing while muted. Hi, everybody. Hi. No, let me just start again. You know what? Hold up. Hey, everyone. How's it going? Today, we're gonna be reading Beelzebub's tales to his grandson, 38, and chapter religion. This is a completely normal stream, and nothing out of the ordinary is going to happen. Anyway, let's jump into it, guys. Let's just jump right into it. So, Beelzebub continued further. Now, I shall explain to you also a little about that obstruction which served as one of the chief causes for the gradual dilution of the psyche of these unfortunate favorites of yours, and namely concerning their peculiar havat vernoni, which is a Gurdjieff term for religion. We got some, religion stuff back in some previous chapters. I think, he had some stuff back in some previous chapters where, he went to Tibet and stuff, and where, was it, in Old Maraplessy or something? Post-Atlantean times, he talked about the first religions and people worshipping animals and stuff, and then the problems with animal sacrifice. Anyway, it's interesting. So we're going back to religion now. And so maybe he's going to comment on religion now in the modern times with the fully developed consequences of the organ Kundabuffer. It's getting a little hot where I am. I'm just going to turn my fan on. Hopefully this doesn't mess the audio. You guys tell me if you can't hear anything. Okay. See, is that messing things up? Anyway, religion. Havat vernona. You'll tell me in a bit if you can't, if it's messing the audio. Okay. Which they always have. The totality of the functioning and the effect of which in the common presences of the beings they call themselves religiousness. So, religion is a mainstay in all human societies. It's something that arises. Beavers create dams, humans create religion. Such an, in the objective sense, indeed arch-maleficent factor for the gradual automatic dwindling of their psyche arose there. So, this is very interesting. Gurdjieff doesn't quite like religion. Not necessarily spirituality or metaphysical things. He just doesn't like the organized institutions. He doesn't have very much respect for them on this ill-starred planet. Also, since various consequences of the properties of always the same for them accursed organ Kundabuffer, take a shot whenever I mispronounce something, began to be crystallized in them, and changing its outer form began to be transmitted from generation to generation. Yes. And so, when, on the one hand, thanks to these crystallizations, there began to be acquired in the common presences of a certain terrestrial three-brained beings, the first germs of what are called Hasnamusian properties. Did we talk about that in chapter 23, the 7 little properties that make you a Hasnamusian? I should totally, find that and clip that. Anyway, in consequences of which such beings began, as is proper to them, for their egotistic aims, to invent for the confusion of surrounding beings similar to themselves various fictions, among which were also every kind of fantastic, what are called religious teachings. And when, on the other hand, other of your favorites begin to have faith in these fantastic religious teachings, and gradually lost their sane mentation, thanks to these same crystallizations, then from time to time on there began to arise in the process of ordinary existence of these strange three-brained beings a large number of havat vernoni, or religions, having nothing in common with each other. Yes, so out of the religious traditions sprout a whole bunch of other institutions and traditions. I guess you have like the Vedic traditions in the East, and then you have the Judaic Christians in the West. Are these different branches, but they differ from each other radically. Even two Jewish traditions can be incredibly different, or even two Buddhist traditions can be incredibly different from each other. But there's basically the problem is there is the what I always find with religions is there is a problem between the tension between like the tradition and the revelation. Like you'll have someone who will have a revelation, and then the person who focuses on the tradition will just be like, "Oh, you had a vision of Jesus. What cloak was he wearing? Oh, he was wearing a blue cloak. Well, my book here says Jesus only comes wearing a red cloak. So if you had a vision of Jesus in a blue cloak, therefore you are the devil. Time to burn you on the stake." And you kind of get these crystallized religious traditions which are just kind of dead and perpetuate themselves. That's how I felt about it. That's how I feel about Anglican Christianity. I'm not gonna put that on any other forms of Christianity, but a lot of things kind of end up that way, where there's this unbalance. Because if you just have people in Revelation with no tradition to bind them together, then everyone just kind of goes delusional and crazy. But if you have only tradition, it just becomes stale and dead. So there's this weird tensional relationship between those two things. But let's see what Gurdjieff says about it. So although, because to Gurdjieff it's not about necessarily having visions or revelations. Gurdjieff wants to develop the human in a particular way. That's really the meaning of life, is this kind of cultivation of higher being bodies and the development of kind of higher functions. But he sees this, he sees kind of, imagination as just illusion, and then on the other hand, he just sees these traditions as things that get in the way. So it'll be interesting. Let's see what he says. Hello, Dylan in the chat. Although all these many varied Havat Vranoni, or religions of theirs, have decidedly nothing in common with each other, yet nevertheless all are built up on the religious teachings, which in their turn are built up exclusively on that, in the objective sense, maleficent idea, which they themselves called good and evil, and which idea, strictly speaking, was the chief factor for the gradual dilution of their general psyche, which still quite recently served as the cause of great events among the blissful higher being bodies, or as they called their souls. That's interesting. So higher being body is a soul. So to develop the higher being bodies is really to develop the souls. And which also interesting, what is a body? A body is a vehicle, so the soul isn't the end. The soul itself is also a vehicle for something else, who dwell on that holy planet in the direction of which we are at the present moment of falling. Good and evil, which chapter was it when he talked about the creation of good and evil? There was like was it Babylonian or was it Tikliamishian philosopher was like, I'm a Hasnamusa now, time to create good and evil, and it kind of ruined everything. Nonetheless, the history of all that, which recently happened on the holy planet Purgatory, ought, in my opinion, so we're going to get to this chapter next, which will be interesting. In my opinion, to be told you without fail, first of all, because these events have a common cosmic character, and are connected with the general individuality of every relatively separately formed, responsible individual. And secondly, because certain members of your genealogical tree involuntarily served as the cause of the arising of these events. But I shall relate about it only at the end of my present tale, as I have a very worthy reason for this concerning the development of your being mentation. About this worthy reason, and also about what considerations I have concerning such an intention of mine, I shall most likely also explain to you in its proper time. Meanwhile, know that there, among these terrestrial three-brained beings who please you, there existed and exists a great quantity of all kinds of religious doctrines, on which these numerous religions of theirs are just built up, and that they usually arise in the following way. Okay. There exists a great quantity of all kinds of... Okay, let's see what he says. I've already told you. So there's a foundation, there's a seed bed, a ground where these religions sprout out of. Let's see what he says. I already told you that when it came clear that thanks to the unforeseeingness of certain most high sacred cosmic individuals, the results of the consequences of the organ Kundabuffer, invented and later removed by these sacred individuals, began to become crystallized in the common presences of these unfortunate three-brained beings, thanks to which it became almost impossible for them to correctly become perfected to the being which three-brained beings ought to have when our abundantly loving common father, we haven't had an all caps line in a while, haven't we, condescended to actualize sometimes in the common presences of certain of them, wherever they may arise, the germ of a sacred individual, so that these latter being completedly formed up to a responsible age and acquiring reason in the conditions which had already become fixed in the general process of the existence of the three-brained beings of this planet, should become aware of reality and indicate to the surrounding beings, similar to themselves, how they ought, with their reason present in them, to guide the process of their functioning, of their separate spiritualized parts. In order this way to decrystallize the already crystallized consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer, so in alchemy we have the line solve et coagula, to dissolve and coagulate. We do need to coagulate, we do need to crystallize high being bodies, but at the same time, there are other things we need to simultaneously dissolve. Well, either simultaneously dissolve or dissolve first before we crystallize. And able to succeed in destroying in themselves the predisposition to the new crystallizations. Yes. So you can think, alchemically, you can think of the human as a walking, talking philosopher's stone, but instead of red, we're black. And so we need to dissolve ourselves, and then, you know, you burn, you heat it up, you boil it, and get all the darkness evaporates. And then you just have the, you know, you collect the dew, just the pure drops. And then once enough drops have been built up, then you have the substance that you recrystallize. And then that's, you could say, the work. And so, my boy, after the sacred Rascuarno proceeds to these terrestrial three-brained beings, or as they themselves express it, when they die in the presences of whom are actualized the germs of sacred individuals, their contemporaries, usually in order to remember and also in order to transmit to the beings of subsequent generations, all that these sacred individuals had indicated and explained, according to their attainments of responsible age, collect it all into one whole. And all this collected into one whole usually just serves as the beginning of all kinds of religious teachings there. The strangeness of the psyche of your favorites in respect of the religious teachings, which arise in this way among them, manifest itself in this, that they already from the very beginning understand literally all that has been said and explained by these genuine sacred individuals actualized from above, and they never take into account in which environment and for which case this or that was said and explained. So this is interesting. This one here is the whole thing about literalism. You can see this in like tantric schools, or maybe left hand. Now, left hand path is a bit of a term. I'm going to use left hand path here in the Eastern sense, where it just means kind of like not mainstream. So in the West, when we say left hand, usually that means like demons and stuff, but in the East it means something different. But in left hand kind of schools, tantric schools, you see these practices that are like sometimes quite odd and sexual and all of that, but the whole point of those practices is, or you eat meat instead of, everyone, all of the other monks being vegetarians and things like that. There's a taboo and you break it. The whole thing about that isn't that you indulge in that thing. It's that you basically have denied yourself your entire life to follow this spiritual path. And you've crystallized yourself to a point, but because you've been denying that thing, that in and of itself has become like a buffer, like a psychic knot has formed because of that. So you do the act, you do the taboo, and it releases like psychic pressure, and then you just never do it again. And so it's kind of like when people read those texts, they don't get that, and they just kind of read, oh yes, there's this sexual tantric technique, and it's like, no, if you live in a culture which is open sexually, where everyone can eat whatever they want, eating meat isn't going to do anything. It's like, I remember there's a story of a Buddhist master who came to the West, and he was teaching Western students, and they got to a certain level, and there was one meditation that when it was done traditionally in Tibet, you had to do naked in a group. And the whole point of that was in Tibetan culture, that's uncomfortable to be naked around people. And it's like, using the uncomfortableness as a support for your meditation. That's a part of the meditation. But if you're like a hippie dippy, this is like one of the early Tibetan teachers that came in like the 60s. So if you're a hippie and you're into free love, and it's like, well, you don't care about being naked. So, let's do this meditation naked. It's not the fact that you're doing it naked. It's the fact that being naked makes you uncomfortable. That was the context that praxis arose in. So, and the Tibetan master understood this. So he got these hippies. This is a real story. He got a whole bunch of hippies, and he made them all buy cheap business suits. And so he got all of these hippies dressed in business suits to like sit around, like tight business suits. Imagine like a hippie, like, yeah, anti-establishment man, and then you go to a meditation circle and they make you dress up like a businessman and like meditate. And that was uncomfortable for them. And so it's like, that's the whole kind of thing. So that evokes the same uncomfortableness, and then they could do the meditation properly. But it's like, a lot of people just don't get that. And they're like, oh yeah, tantric texts, man. And it's like, if you don't have any asceticism in you whatsoever, doing tantric practices isn't going to do anything. You're just going to keep indulging in what you've already done. It does nothing, bro. It does nothing. Anyway, rant over. What did Marshall say? Interesting. Breaking cultural norms and taboos and engaging in tantric. Very George Bataille. Yes, exactly. Exactly. I mean, yeah. Whenever anyone talks about tantra, everyone mentions the sexual stuff. No one likes to mention the tantric texts where you're told to go to a graveyard and dig up a dead body and like eat like dead human flesh. It's like that's not talked about. It's fucking gross. I would never do that. But like that's that's an agori thing. They do that. That's a tantric thing. Why don't we have people doing that? Huh? Anyway, tantra aside, let's move forward. So yeah, the whole point is people read things literally and don't understand the context in which the practice actually arose. And further, already during the transmission from generation to generation, all these religious teachings, the sense of which had already from the very beginning been distorted, they begin to adopt in regard to them the following two factors, which had already become fixed. And the same thing goes for like the drug thing. Like traditions that are like used a hallucinogen. It's like, yeah, man, hallucinogen. It's spiritual. Let's now all take LSD and go to this techno rave party. And it's like, no, like, the Native Americans used tobacco. Yeah, like once every 6 months in a religious ceremony. They didn't just smoke it in their work break, bro. Like, oh my, anyway. Adopt in regard to the following two factors, which had already become fixed in the general existence of these strange three-brained beings. The first of these consists in this, that those beings who in the given period of the flow of time belong to the caste called the ruling class immediately hook on to these religious teachings, just that. So I think this is going to be another trickle-down effect from the top class to the lower classes. That for them most maleficent question, which exists on this ill-starred planet under the name of religion for the state or state for the religion. And correspond. So that's why the higher classes take on a religion is for this interplay. And corresponding to this, they gradually begin with every kind of artfulness to juggle with the previously fixed facts for the justification of their own egoistic aims. And the second consists in this, that certain ordinary beings there, owing to the fault of their producers, acquired in their common presences, during their arising as well as during their formation into responsible beings, the inherency of what is called psychopathy and Parasitism. Yes. Yeah. Many priests are just that. In consequence of which, they do not have and cannot have in themselves any data at all for the manifestation of any being duty, whatever it might be, and become, as it were, authorities for all the trifling details of the new religious teachings, which have already arisen in the mentioned way, and begin, as it is said, to peck like crows at a jackal's carcass. Jesus. That totality already pecked from the very beginning without this of what had been spoken and indicated by the genuine sacred individuals intentionally actualized from above. So the sacred individuals actually give a true doctrine, and then the doctrine dies, and then the crows come and pick from the dead carcass all these little things that they then use to construct their new religions, their Hasnamusian traditions with. Voice in the Wilderness says hello. Hello, Voice. Welcome to the live stream. Join us in learning about religion from Gurdjieff. Speaking briefly, the result of the mentioned two factors among the three-brained beings of this strange planet, which had been fixed in the process of ordinary existence, and namely the inherency in the beings belonging to the caste of the ruling class and the psychopathy of certain of their ordinary beings, is that they always get divided on questions of religion. Soon after its foundation, on whatever religious doctrines these religions may have been built up, into their famous sects. And these sects, in their turn, get divided into other sects. And thanks to this, just the same occurs there in all epochs on this comparatively not large planet in the sense of religions. As with the large number of the spoken languages there, referring to which our highly esteemed Mullah Nasr ad-Din called it a thousand-tongued hydra. And in the present case, he would say varied titillating titillations. Oh, hello. How do you titillate an ocelot? Do you oscillate its titzel? And am I right, guy? Anyway, that's interesting. So the religions split, and then the religions form sects, and then even as it spreads around the world, different languages continue to fracture it, and you just get basically this hydra effect of religions. There's so much noise, but all you need to do is grasp like something real, and then you can kind of make your way, make a path through the noise to find what's real. During my observations on the process of the existence of these peculiar three-brained beings, there had been many times actualized from above, in the common presences of certain of them, the germs of these sacred individuals, and almost on each occasion, with the exception only of the most sacred Ashiata Shayamash, and all connected with him, which flowed from his own great labors. After their completed formation and their fulfillment of the mission imposed on them from above, when the process of the sacred Raskuarno was completed, so that's death, so the sacred individuals come down, give their doctrine, and then they die, was completed within them, such religious teachings always begin in the mentioned way to arise among these peculiar beings there, i.e. they at first, as I said, collected into one whole all that was indicated and explained in detail by the sacred individuals, intentionally actualized from above. Because that's just it, a sacred individual helps their followers, but like something they may say to a follower may just apply to that specific follower in that specific, instance. And then that gets codified as some kind of parable that then just gets plastered or used via the entire tradition. And and just things like that happen all the time. This is why you have all these seeming contradictions in religious doctrines. It's because the sacred individual who the religion is founded off of, in some instances what they're talking about, the individual will talk about as things that are causal, will have an effect on your spirit or your being, and things that are more for the removal of specific conditions for other individuals trying to do the work. It's like, that whole kind of thing, if you're a parent, you know this, or if you've done teaching before, you have 10 students, You give them all the same instructions. At the same time, they're all there, they all hear the same thing, then they all go off and they come back, and what happens? You get 10 different results. Why do you get 10 different results? Everyone has different conditions. So you need to kind of work with these conditions. That's what the sacred individuals have to do. So you have to kind of understand the conditions that the sacred individual was teaching in, and what part of their tradition is actually the part that's causal, that actually leads to, you know, immortality, awakening, and all of that. And not get sidetracked by something that a crow has just picked off of the jackal's ass. Anyway, for the purpose of remembering it all, so a sacred individual dies, process Rascuano, and then everyone collects everything that that individual said in one place. For the purpose of remembering it all themselves, and also for the purpose of transmission to subsequent generations, yet of course, into one whole which they collected from the very beginning. As it is said there, from bits here and there, and later, as all of this, which was collected together, fell into the hands of just those two mentioned types there. So they say it's one whole, but really there's always bits that they're missing. And so you have these different students that are still the same, the student of one master, but the students teach very differently. Just then they began, as I already expressed it, to peck at all this, and further dividing themselves up into their famous what are called sects. Who is the author, by the way? There's George Ivanovich Gurdjieff. Mr. Fine Free Fine in the chat. This is Gurji Burji is a mystic from not from ye olde days. Turn of the century, would you say? He was clearly born in like the 1800s and started teaching like early 1900s in Russia. Escaped the Iron Curtain coming down, and then taught in France. And his students kind of went to America and some into Britain and things like that. But he's a very interesting person. He's one of those guys who, you know, went to the East and came back with teachings. But no one really knows where he got his stuff from. So it's one of those things, we like to read it and like kind of, you contemplate it, but there's also this interesting speculation. You know, he's referencing Zarathustra here, or is he referencing Hermes there? That kind of thing. It's very interesting. To peck at all of this, further dividing themselves up into sects, already compose new fantastic religious teachings thought out by themselves. So each generation, the tradition adds something. There are no pure teachings. Anyone who tells you they have pure teachings, anyone who represents a tradition and says, don't follow that person, you should follow me because my teachings are purer, that person is delusional. Anyone who says the term pure teachings, they're delusional. 100%. 100%. Each generation adds something to the teachings. At the very least, they should add something. They should add their own inspirations and their own results. But nonetheless, Kadirza asks in the chat, but do you practice Gurdjieff though? I mean, I don't know if I practice Gurdjieff. I have his teachings as a part of my practice, yeah. It has definitely influenced me. But I'm not a member of any fourth way group. At the moment, at least. Anyway, actually, I'll have some video coming out about that later, probably next year. I'll do an ultimate guide to self-remembering. See how that goes down. As a result, which there are always obtained on this planet of yours, firstly, a large number of religions as numerous as the colors in the rainbow, and secondly, as it is said, the same old story. Hello, Plant Loaf in the chat. I wonder if Jesus' idea of guilt and original sin is meant to make the individual realize actions which go against their previous spirit, so good karma can build up in there. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing. In Gurdjieff's work, he uses some very interesting terms. He doesn't use guilt or shame. He uses the terms remorse. Like, he changes that. You know, like, there's another author who said something like, guilt kills willpower. And, you know, you don't want to kill your will, but at the same time, you need to be able to alter your actions if they don't serve you if they're just degenerating you in a sense. So how do you do that? And remorse, what is repentance? The term repentance is metanoia, which means literally to like do a 180 and moonwalk away kind of thing. But that's how whenever you see repentance in Christianity, that's what they're translating it from, the Greek term metanoia. I'm pretty sure it's metanoia. Anyway, but I think there's different movements with different translations, and some people like know remorse, this feeling, not guilt, but remorse that affects it's almost like remorse is something that comes from the higher emotional cylinder. It's like remorse is knowledge of your, maybe it's like guilt and shame. It's just like you do something and you feel a little guilt and shame or something, but remorse means you also understand what the there was a good option, but you didn't choose it, and you now need to kind of change permanently. Remorse leads to permanent change. Guilt and shame don't lead to permanent change. Guilt and shame just stagnate you, basically. So that's I would say that's what Gurdjieff's take on Jesus' idea of repentance, or the Christian idea of repentance would be. That's my interpretation. So during recent times, your favorite had many hundreds of these peculiar independent religious teachings in the common planetary process of their being existence. And the basis for all of them was the totality of the indications and the explanations which had still survived and which had arisen in the mentioned way, given to them by the sacred individuals intentionally actualized among them from above. Hazel asks, so is guilt in the Catholic sense a bastardization of remorse? Quite probable. There's a lot of bastardizations in Christianity. My favorite bastardization in Christianity is actually the Protestant one, is where in the Bible's originally written in Greek, so they use the terms love, but in Greek there's different types of love. Storge, philia, eros, and agape. So storge is love without effort, usually seen as like a love for a mother for their baby child. Philia is relational love, so two guys who are best friends, like a buddy cop movie where two guys like high five, that's philia. Eros is that carnal love, but there's also an esoteric side to eros. And then agape is, it's compassion for all, it's universal love, the Buddha, Jesus, that's agape. And in the Bible, whenever they translated the Bible into English and that term agape was used, they translate agape as charity. So whenever you hear like a Protestant being like, it's the gospel of wealth, charity is what being a Christian is like. Charity. Now donate $27.95 to get into heaven. All of that like televangelist, all of that charity, that Protestant thing. No, it's not about charity. It's about agape. Charity is a mistranslation that has arisen as a bastardization. That's another degeneration. Anyway, hope I explained that all right. But yeah, there's a lot, all the different Christian sects, they all have different little bastardizations, which I think I remember one guy, I can't remember who it was, if it was George Aziz, he was another Gurdjieff teacher. There was one Gurdjieff group that was led by a guy, just a second, and he, had different kind of groups of students, and his more advanced group, at one point, how Gurdjieff groups do readings of Beelzebub, just like we're doing here, but in a group. His more advanced group, they had been through the book, they had been through other fourth way texts, and so he basically turned that into a study group where they all were to read the Bible, but in Greek. So they basically just had like a Bible in Greek, and then like Greek to English, like dictionary, and it was like painstaking, but the guy, I remember he did an interview, and he was just like, when you read the Bible in Greek, it's a completely different book. It's whatever, if you've read the Bible in English, you haven't read the Bible. It was basically his takeaway from it. And, there's lots of different, people say that about all kind of things. People say if you haven't read the Quran in Arabic, you just haven't read the Quran. And, this is the problem with, on the translators and their lies. No, there is no such thing as a true translation. All translation is interpretation. And so in Gurdjieff's, system, he talks about the numbers of 7 types of man. There are man 1, 2, and 3, and then there's a man 4 who started awakening, man number 5 who has a higher being body, man number 6, man number 7. If you have a man number 3, doing translations, he can only ever interpret to a certain degree. If you have a man number 6 or man number 7 with a little bit of objective consciousness, then their translations will be better, will be deeper. But it's like, that's the whole kind of thing. It's like, you can only draw out what you could say what your level of being is. And, yeah, I mean, there's a difference between, like, just translating, I don't know, a political debate and translating a sacred mystical text. This is one of the big problems with especially ancient Greek Platonic stuff, where, you know, rationalist atheist scholars will translate Plato and be like, yes, it was all about rationalism. And it's like, no, read the Phaedrus, bro, where Socrates is like, yeah, rationalism is good, but you know the best way to get knowledge? Divine madness, triggered by Eros, lol. Like, that's... Anyway, big tangent there. This is, Burn in the chat says, this is why Catholics get so anal about interpretations and use tradition as well. Yeah, and this is hard. It's like, what do you do? Do you also, if someone wants to interact with your tradition, if they feel the call to it, do you really want to also gatekeep and girl boss and be like, no, you're not allowed to even read the Bible unless it's in Latin or something? It's like, this is why we need to get in a group. We need to just not be dicks and just kind of get together and kiss. Why can't we all just get along? Language and linguistics are important, damn. That's a lot of hard work. Yeah, that is, Marshall. I mean, yeah, there is that side of it. It may pay, you don't need to learn world languages or something, but it may pay to one day just learn another language, just so because a different language makes you think differently. And you also, it's weird to say this if you don't speak another language. Learning another language, you get a different personality. Your personality in that other language is different from the personality you have in your native language. For people who don't speak 2 languages, this is kind of a weird statement, but like that's a real thing, I swear to God. People have different personalities depending on the language that they speak. Man, we went way off topic, Chad. We went way off topic. Let's keep going. In a measure where given sacred individuals intentionally actualize... Yeah, okay, cool. So, on these survived totalities, by which, during recent times, they were in a strange manner inspired, and from which their bob-tailed reason, they borrowed ideas for the inventions of their still newer and newer religious teachings. There were based 5 religions which still exist today, namely those religions called Buddhistic, Hebrew, Christian, Mohammedan, and Lamist. Very interesting. Our Voice in the Wilderness says, agreed. I'm multilingual. That's a great way to describe it. You know what's up, bro. You know what's up. And this is an interesting list here. So this is obviously not a list of world religions. This is a list of religions that Gurdjieff came into contact with. And it's very interesting. You can kind of see what kind of level of the tradition he thinks, what level of tradition he came into contact with by what he kind of interacts with, or how he kind of labels these things. Lamist is interesting. So he differentiates Buddhistic from Lamist. Like, the Lamists are specifically hiding away in their temples and doing weird stuff, whereas the Buddhistic, maybe he's talking about Mahasiddhas here. Let's see what he says. But he also has the Judeo-Christian Mohammedan kind of lineage here, but he also separates them and sees them as completely different. So let's see what he says. As my Mexican slang personality is received well by my dishwasher friends. Yes, Tyler. Thank you, Tyler. Okay. Concerning the first of them, and namely the Buddhistic religion, I have already once told you. So he starts with Buddhism, probably because around the time this was published, Buddhism was like was getting hot. So he's talking about Buddhism to attract people's attention. The second, namely the Hebrew, is founded, as it were, precisely on the teaching of Saint Moses, by which name one of the sacred individual was called, who in his turn was intentionally actualized from above. Okay. So that's interesting. Is he saying Saint Moses is a sacred individual? Well, he calls him Saint Moses. Okay, that's very interesting. It's very, because all Kabbalah comes down traditionally kind of from Moses in a sense. I know there's different traditions that are like, the Sefer Raziel was first written by Adam in the Garden of Eden when the angel Raziel taught him or something, and it's like, yeah, but it was lost and then recovered and lost and recovered, and the whole kind of thing is Moses is the person who restored Kabbalah, and then he gives, he gives the lore, and then his brother Aaron, the Aaronic teachings, are like then the secret teachings, and Kabbalah comes off that side or whatever, or how would they do it? There's some secret teachings of Moses, and that's what Kabbalah is. And so Kabbalah then in the beginning basically just becomes an exegesis of the Pentateuch, or the books of Moses. So you're looking for Moses's secret teachings in those books, the Genesis, Exodus, all of those things. So that's interesting that he considers Moses a sacred individual. So he has some respect for Kabbalah in this sense. So yeah, Burns says all Old Testament holy people are saints. Yeah, I'm thinking of it in the way Gurdjieff is using saint. Is this specifically a person who's actualized via an action from the sacred holy center, eternal endlessness in the center of the universe or whatever. The way Gurdjieff is using it is slightly different. Anyway, the actualization of this sacred individual proceeded there in the planetary body of a boy who arose in the country now called Egypt, so this sounds like Moses, a little after my first personal sojourn on the surface of this planet of yours. This sacred individual, whom your favorites at the present time call Saint Moses, okay, so he's going to give us a little Moses story, accomplished a great deal for them and left them many of those exact and corresponding indications for ordinary existence, so that if they would adopt, actualize them normally, then indeed all the consequences of the properties of the absolutely maleficent for them organ Kundabuffer might become gradually decrystallized, and even the predisposition for new crystallizations may be destroyed. So that's interesting. So this is he's kind of commenting on the laws of Moses, or the teachings of Moses are to minimize the effects of the Kundabuffer. But to the common misfortune of all beings, with just a little reason of all our great universe, they began gradually to mix into all the counsels and indications of this normality-loving Saint Moses, as it was already proper to them, to do such a mass of what are called spices, that the saintly author himself could not, with all his wish, recognize anything of his own in this, and as it were, totality collected by them all, he had explained and indicated. So basically, the laws of Moses, they come down to us, have slowly been corrupted over time, according to Gurdjieff. And so Moses, the original guy, according to Gurdjieff, is cool, but the Mosaic teachings that come down to us, he's like, nah. It's just different rabbis spicing things up, and it doesn't really have its proper intended effect anymore. So your favorites of already the first generation of the contemporaries of Saint Moses evidently found it profitable for their special aims to insert in these religious teachings almost the entire fantastic teaching which I already told you, when I related that among the ancient three-brained beings of the second grouping on the continent Arshak. So Arshak is the continent of Asia. Arshak is the label given to the continent of Asia post-Atlantis, but before our history. So post-Atlantis, but pre-history, the continent of Asia was called Arshak, or contemporary Asia. There was a king named Canusian. Ooh, that's a cool name. A subsequent saint. Oh, so Canusian was a saint who, for the purpose of saving his subjects from the pernicious habit of chewing the seed of the poppy, first invented his fantastic religious doctrine. Actually, did we read this in a previous chapter? Man, my memory is getting blurry now. After Saint Moses, that sacred individual was actualized there, who laid the beginnings of that religion, which your contemporary favorites call Christianity. This sacred individual, called by your favorites Jesus Christ, was actualized in the planetary body of a boy, that race of terrestrial three-brained beings, whom Saint Moses, on the command from above, chose from among the beings of the country Egypt and led to what is called the land of Canaan. So there's also, I'm not sure if he's going into it here, but there's that conspiracy theory that Moses was actually just straight up Egyptian. Like, he wasn't a Jew, and then he got put in the reed basket and put down the river, and then the royal family picked him up, and he got trained as a priest. There's actually a conspiracy that he's kind of like straight up an Egyptian priest that just kind of got disgruntled with the priesthood in Egypt, helped the Jews out, and just like bounced. And because he helped their community, they retroactively make him a Jew in their stories. But of course, that's a bit sacrilegious because, you know, he's one of the patriarchs and founder of the Jewish race. But nonetheless, he would have mixed into that race. And so Gurdjieff is basically saying Jesus Christ's planetary body was a mix of that Canaanite, Egyptian, Israelite kind of stock. The author should have really been better at articulating because he uses way too many adjectives. Is there a dictionary? So, yeah, this is the whole thing, Plant Loaf. This book he deliberately made obtruse. So there's stories of Gurdjieff writing this book, and then he would like take a chapter to his students, his advanced students, and he'd read it out to them. And if they understood it, he would go back and write it harder. Because the whole kind of thing is you have to earn it. So it's interesting because there's this whole thing. It's like, books get corrupted over time. Books become obtruse. You know, translation. This itself is a translation. So how do you kind of preserve the essence, even though you know it's going to have to move through time and be translated? He has this kind of method of deliberately making it hard to read so that it forces you to look behind what he's saying and try to, like, as he would say, dig up the dog. So the whole kind of thing of this is it's deliberately hard, so it forces you to kind of think, like, what is he actually saying? And that kind of interplay helps you kind of, helps you unveil it. But also, he also said you should read this book in groups. And the reason why is if I'll say something and I'll mention something, and that'll be something that you didn't notice. But there's blind spots in my consciousness that I don't see in the text. So someone else will read the text and they'll be like, oh, I noticed this and I didn't notice that. And then there'll be a third person who noticed something that neither of me or the other guy noticed. And so when you read this book in a group setting, it gives not an illusion of objective consciousness, but it's like someone with objective consciousness is kind of present. It's like we fill in the gaps of each other's subjective view, and we kind of have a pseudo-objective consciousness then on this book, and we're able to dig out the little esoteric nuggets he's leaving in there. So Marshall in chat says, Gurdjieff is the wild trickster figure, bruh. Damn straight. It is emblematic in his writing. Yeah, exactly. So Gurdjieff is he's using the trickster. He's using the trickster to basically force us to, yeah, he's, in a sense, it's kind of elitist, because he's basically saying, get on my level. But at the same time, hey, I want to get on that level. He doesn't really, this is the whole thing that I find about genuine teachers. The difference between gurus and genuine spiritual teachers. Gurus want students. A genuine teacher doesn't want you to be a student. They only teach you something, and once you learn it, your relationship ends. And it either ends, or if you do continue that relationship, you're their friend. You're the peer. You're a peer. Gurus want students. These teachers, these actual esoteric spiritual teachers, they want you to be their peer. So you want to get on their level. Dylan asks, how do I turn my staff into a snake? Well, you just type in pretty girl into Google Images, and then your snake will turn into a staff. I know how to do that one, but it's hard to do it in reverse. It really is. Anyway, let's, by using the power of friendship, we will uncover the esoteric truths in this book. Let's do it. Let's do it. After this, Jesus, so he's kind of going through the lineage here. So there was Moses, and then there was this King Canusian, and now there's Jesus. After this Jesus, there were actualized also on the continent Asia 2 other sacred individuals, on whose teachings the beings were there founded 2 of the enumerated religions existing there today. If you created this reading group to fill in the gaps of your subjectivity, then you are based and I loved you. Yes. Basically, this is why we're here. This is why we're here. And it's not just it. I'm recording it online, so people in the future can come and also join in on this again and again and again. So, hello, future people. We're all helping each other out through time. What would you call it? What would you call it? Fourth dimensional high five. Just through the timeline, we connect with each other. And namely, one of these two sacred individuals was Saint Muhammad, who appeared among the, as they are called, Arabs, and the other, Saint Lama, okay, that's interesting, appeared among the beings dwelling in the country named Tibet. So he doesn't like, obviously this isn't the original Buddha. The Buddha was Nepalese or Indian or Scythian, but this is either a generic term or there is technically one person who fits this bill, the Saint of Tibet, that kind of really brought Buddhism into order. There is the Lama Tsongkhapa, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. And it may just be that it was like too hard to, get Westerners to. I mean, he uses all these weird adjectives. Why didn't he mention the Tsongkhapa Lama? Come on, man. Anyway. So we got the Tibetan Lamists, and we got Saint Muhammad. So at the present time, the first of the 5 religious teachings I mentioned, and namely the Buddhistic, is spread chiefly among the beings dwelling in the country India. The former, Chania, and in the countries called China and Japan. Yeah, we'll see what Gurdjieff says about Islam. That's interesting. Because, I mean, this is just it. Is he going to critique Islam, or when he says Islam, does he mean Sufism? Or Sufism. The followers of the second religious teaching, and namely the Hebrew, are now scattered over the whole planet. In this place of my tales, it will do no harm also to remark the cause itself, owing to which the followers of the teachings of this Moses are scattered over the whole planet, as from this explanation you will well understand about one peculiar property of the organ Kundabhafa, and namely about the property which evokes the feeling called envy. And you will also understand in what way each property of this organ, however small it may be the cause of very great consequences. Alrighty, let's go. Let's see how pro-Israel Gurdjieff gets. The point is that the beings who chiefly professed the teaching of this Moses then very well organized themselves in their community, and therefore in the psyche of the beings of all other communities of that period, this same property called envy began to be crystallized in relation to the beings of this community. So other people became envious of the community. And so strongly was this property crystallized in them that even after the flow of many of their centuries, when the Hebrew community already ceased to be organized and powerful, and this former powerful community came to an end, as occurs there according to law to all powerful communities. So that's interesting. There's a cosmic law which disperses the big and powerful. The big and powerful always die, and the small always endure and are eternal. Then not only was this relation towards the beings of the descendants of this community on the part of the beings of other communities not destroyed, but even in the majority of them, the feeling of envy towards them has already become organic. So people of the earth just have an organic hatred of Jews. So it's just a consequence of the Kundabhafa organ, and just everyone's just born with it. Just like, ugh, Jew. Like, that's just a thing that happens now. The third religion, founded on the teaching of Jesus Christ, very soon became, in its primordial form, so widely spread that almost 1/3 of all three-centered beings on this planet were its followers. But thereafter, they began gradually to strip also this religious teaching based on resplendent love and transformed it into something also resplendent, but already, as our dear Mullah Nasser ad-Din says, into a resplendent teras kaburha from the fairy tale Kaso Aji. Oh god, I'm already cancelled, aren't I? Yes. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see how cancelled this is. I mean, yeah. It's not too bad at the moment. So in the case of this this great religious teaching, indeed, it also happened among them that its followers divided themselves on account of exterior details of small importance into various sects, and came to be called not just Christians, as all the first followers of this teaching called themselves, but also Orthodox, Sevrodox, Ipsilodox, Hamelodox. Are these real terms, bruh? Bruh, these can't be. That can't be real. That can't be real. Oh, god damn it! I hate you, Google. Yeah, that's what I thought. This is just a Gurdjieff term, isn't it? Oh wait, Wait, what the hell is this? Oh no, this is also a Gurdjieff site. Yeah, what are you talking about? Get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here, Gurdjie Burgie. Trying to trick me. Hamelodox and various other cognomens, also ending in dox. Did I miss the description of the three-brain thing? Maybe. So yeah, we are three-brained beings. Ooh, Crimdim in the chat says, Kasoaji as a word breaks my brain and tongue. Yeah, okay, yeah. A lot of these words are breaking my brain. They're all breaking my brain. So at least one of those words is real, though. So I think when he said, like, resplendent, it's become stripped of... Christianity has become stripped of its love. It's still resplendent, but it's no longer loving. And it's broken into many different Orthodox kind of schools. So I guess Orthodox is one. One of these is going to be Catholic, one of these is going to be Protestant, and one of them is going to be something. Something that he's going to dunk on. Let's see where he goes. And into this teaching of truth and verity, they begin also to mix, for various egoistic and political reasons, fragments taken from other religious teachings already existing there, but fragments such as had not only in common with the teachings of Jesus, but which sometimes even flatly contradicted truths this divine teacher taught. So we get lots of interesting mixes there. They mixed in a great deal from the teaching of Saint Moses, which by that time had already been thoroughly distorted, and much later, namely during the period which contemporary beings called the Middle Ages. Are we going to get Platonic Christianity? The so-called elders of the church inserted into this Christian religion nearly the whole of that fantastic doctrine invented by those learned beings in the city of Babylon, who belonged to the school of dualists, about which I have already told you. Very interesting. So a lot of the dualism in Christianity is Babylonian in origin, according to Gurdjieff. The elders of the church in the Middle Ages probably inserted this last doctrine for the convenience of their own shops, for the shops of their assistants, because of the famous paradise and hell contained in it. Exactly. You don't want grandma to burn in hell, boy? Well, maybe just put a little cash in this gilded plate, and me and the boys round back, we'll pray extra hard so she goes to the pearly gates instead. You get what I mean? I don't know why medieval continental Europe priests sound like, I don't know, rednecks from America. I wonder if he's referring to the heresies of, like, Arianism. I don't think he is. I think he's referring to, like, you know how in some Christian traditions there's like some weird saints that are clearly pagan gods? Like, the one that I always remember is from Celtic Christianity. The Saint Bridget is literally the goddess Bridget. They just, but when I look at that, I don't look at that as a stolen thing. I look at that as more as like the Druids were like, oh, and they just straight up smuggled their religion into Christianity so that it can perpetuate through time without dying. So it's like a pagans trolling Christians by just putting on a Christian paint job just so they can kind of survive. Hey, those were hard times. Priests gotta eat. Nah, man. Those priests are greedy. They need to share more, lol. Anyway. So, and therefore, at the present time, in place of the teaching of the divine teacher, Jesus Christ, in which, among other things, was revealed the power of the all-lovingness and all-forgiveness of our Creator. Voodoo borrowed her too. Saint Bridget, really? Hazel in the chat. I mean, because there's like Catholicism got a bunch of their... that absorbed a lot of their saints, maybe pseudo-historical heroes or pagan gods. But then you have like... modern day voodoo is really, you know, Afro-paganism combined with Catholicism. So it's like... it wouldn't surprise me if there's some voodoo traditions that use Saint Bridget. That's pretty crazy. And also, like, you know, the Celtic traditions, they're very nature kind of working, and voodoo's kind of nature magic, so, or working with the intelligences behind the forces of nature. So that's interesting. No, Saint Nicholas was a real guy. He slapped a guy at the council. Yeah, Saint Nick is also the patron saint of prostitutes, did you know? There's the story of Saint Nick is there was a guy whose daughters were going to get sold into prostitution, and so he chucks like bags of coins down their chimney, or some say it was just like, you know, the original one was through the window, but like through the chimney, and so they were able to have the father then use the bag of coins as like a dowry to then pay for the wedding, so he could marry off his daughters instead of having them go into prostitution. So Saint Nick saved the girls from being put into prostitution. So Saint Nicholas, Santa Claus, is the patron saint of prostitutes, technically. Very interesting. Santa. Isn't Santa Claus literally... well, Santa Claus, the American Santa Claus, is actually a hybrid of like Saint Nick and then like of Dutch legends and other Europe. Because, you know, you've got what... in America, you've got what? You've got the Irish, you've got Scottish, you've got Dutch, you've got, you know, French... you've got English settlers, and there's different little continental European traditions have all these different kind of guys that then kind of come together and synthesize into a Santa Claus. Based on wholesome St. Nicholas, damn straight, damn straight. Now, I got a little distracted there. Where am I? So, teaching of the divine teacher, Jesus Christ, in which, among all other things, was revealed the power of the all-lovingness and all-forgivingness of our Creator suffering for beings. It is now already taught there that our Creator mocks the souls of those who follow this teaching, Lamau. So, even God looks down at Christians and is like, oof, oof. Dear and kind grandfather of mine, explain to me, please, what it means by elders of the church, asked Hassien. So we get a line from Hassien here. So for those who don't know, Hassien is Beelzebub's actual grandson. This book being Beelzebub's tales to his grandson, Beelzebub is talking to his grandson, Hassien. And Hassien actually gets a line in. So they call elders of the church there those beings who become professional dignitaries of the highest rank of any religious teaching. Having merely replied thus laconically, Beelzebub continued further, by the way, may I tell you here that among a rather small group of terrestrial beings, the teaching of Jesus Christ was preserved unchanged. Ooh, are we going to get Ethiopian Christians? And passing from generation to generation has even reached the present time in its original form. The smallest group of terrestrial beings is designated the Brotherhood of Essenes. Okay, so maybe not. The beings of this brotherhood succeeded at first in introducing the teaching of this divine teacher into their own being existence, and subsequently in transmitting it from generation to generation to later generations as a very good means for freeing themselves from the consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer. So it seems like only small communities can continuously remove from themselves the consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer, like continuously and successfully over generations. So we all need to make a commune and start the work together, guys. Let's do it. Now, as regards the fourth great religion existing there now, which arose several centuries after the Christian religion and was founded on the teaching of the full of hope Saint Muhammad. This religion at first spread there widely, and it might perhaps have become eventually a hearth of hope and reconciliation for them all, if these strange beings had not stirred this also into a hodgepodge. Okay, so Saint Muhammad gets mentioned here, and he's all Gucci, but then his followers, they just messed it all up again. On the one hand, its followers also mixed into it something from the fantastic theory of the Babylonian duelists. But on the other hand, the elders of the church of this religion, called, in this case, Sheikhs Islamists, themselves invented and added to it many things about the blessings of the notorious paradise, which as it were existed in the other world. Such blessings as perhaps could never even have entered the head of the chief governor of purgatory, his all-quarters maintainer, the arch-cherub Helkgematios, even if he were deliberately to try to imagine them. So, basically, Gurdjieff is knocking the Islamic view of the afterlife here. Yes. Everyone in the chat, we're all going to make our own Gurdjieffian paradise, hey? It's definitely not going to become a cult, right, guys? Right, guys? Right, guy? Anyway. Although the followers of this religion also, from the very first, split into many different groups and subgroups, which, by the way, continue there even up till now, nevertheless, they all subscribe to one or another of its two independent, as they are called, schools, which were formed at the very beginning of its arising. So he's going to talk about Sunni and Shiite. These two schools of the Mohammedan religion are called there Sunni and Sunnite and Shiite. I lived in a Fine Free Fine says, I lived in a religious commune. It was not good, but the path finds you where you are. Yeah. Yeah. They be special, those communes. I think if you had like a real teacher, maybe it could work, but I'm not down for a commune. I'm down for creating a school where maybe people come and live in and then go back to their lives or something, but we'll see how even systems like that go. It is very interesting to note that the psychic hatred of each other formed in the psyche of the beings who belong to these two independent schools of one and the same religion has, on account of their frequent clashes, now been transformed completely into an organic hate. Oh, hello. So the different sects hate each other more than they hate non-believers. Beings of certain European communities have, during recent centuries, greatly contributed by their incitement to the rise of this peculiar transformation of that strange being function. Yes. Ocean at Night in the chat says, chat is going off right now. Yes, it is, Ocean. Yes, it is. I'm trying to ignore it as I read. I'm like, no, don't get sucked in. And they have employed and continue to employ this incitement in order that the animosity between the beings who follow these two independent schools of one and the same religion should increase, that they should never unite, since if this were to happen, there might soon be an end. Therefore, those European communities. The point is that nearly half of the ordinary three-brained beings there are followers of the Mohammedan teaching, and only as long as this mutual hatred exists among them will they mean nothing terrifying in the sense of reciprocal destruction to European communities. So he's kind of talking about the balkanization of like Arabia and the East. Like, thanks to the Mohammedan sects fighting each other, they're going to be a less threat to the European communities. BLPR in the chat says, about to go read Red Lion. We'll see what the fuzz is about. Great book. Fantastic book. Burns says, ignore me, but Christianity isn't even dualistic. I think the dualism he's talking about isn't a metaphysical dualism in that sense. The dualism I think he's mentioning is like the dualism between physicality and spirituality. So there's a physical world and there's a spiritual world. We have a physical body and we have a soul. And there's spiritual stuff and there's material stuff, and they're two completely different things, and somehow they're stitched together. What do you call it? Ontological dualism? I think he's what he's talking about, but we'll see where he goes. I mean, Gurdjieff kind of talks about, but in a sense, Gurdjieff is a materialist, but he's a materialist, but the matter just refines and everything's connected, and there's this refinement of matter, this chain of being, all the way from God all the way to matter in Gurdjieff. So Gurdjieff would technically be like a not really panpsychist, but it's not that there's matter or consciousness, there's matter and consciousness, and there's this weird mirroring effects that they have on each other. That's how I interpret. I'm not sure if Gurdjieff would agree with that, but that's my view of kind of Gurdjieff's ontology that he's kind of going for, or I can glean from it. Hence, it is that accidentally arisen, newly baked communities always rub their hands and rejoice when sparks fly between these Sunnites and Shiites, because they then count on a long and secure existence for themselves. Like, good, more brother wars, yes. That's what all of the Hasnamusians want. Now, as regards the fifth teaching, so the Lama's teaching, so it's interesting. He said he in Gurdjieff's mind, he breaks off Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism. He doesn't call Tibetan Buddhism Buddhism. He calls that Lamism. The teachings of Saint Lama, also a genuine messenger from our endlessness. The teaching of this sacred individual was spread among those three-brained beings there who, on account of the geopolitical conditions, scarcely ever happened to come into contact with other beings of this ill-starred planet, and in consequence have scarcely been affected by the abnormally established conditions of ordinary being existence there. So Tibet is kind of cordoned off from the rest of the world. One part of this teaching also, its followers also soon changed and destroyed, but its other part already more or less entered into existence of this group of beings and began to produce the expected results, thanks to which the hope grew even among the highest sacred individuals that this teaching created by the saintly labors of Saint Lama, sorry, I'm just tripping balls here, might sometimes actualize what had already become a necessity in the megalocosmos for everything that exists. Hold on a second. One part of the teaching also soon changed and destroyed, but its other part already more or less entered into existence. Okay, so the teachings of Saint Lama didn't get completely corrupted. Some were lost and destroyed, but some part of it continued, and actually continues among the Lamas. Prioress of Vespers in the chat says, I don't mean to go off on topic, but I love your hat. Why, thank you. Thank you. You know the story behind this hat? Maybe I'll mention the hat. It's was kind of a joke. So my local Theosophical Society asked me to do a talk there, and they wanted me. I was like, "What talk should I give?" And the outreach guy was just like, "Just do a talk on inner alchemy or something." I was like, "Okay." So I was doing this. I was, come up with stuff for this talk, and then I was like, "What'd be funny?" And as a joke, I got this hat made, and when I gave the talk there, I had it hidden in what I was wearing. And at the end, I ended the talk with this, I pull it out and was like, and so in the end, we must make alchemy great again. And I got a laugh. And then I threw this hat, just in my cupboard and just forgot about it. And then, earlier this year, I was making YouTube videos, and I'm like, man, when I got monetized, I was like, you can open your shop. And I was like, well, I don't really have a brand. I don't really have anything to wear. I don't really have any items. What would I use? And then this whisper from my cupboard just came out. This hat was just speaking to me, like the Green Goblin mask, like, come to me. We can rule together. And I was like, no, 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 coward. Use your powers. And I was like, no, no, no. And then I just started wearing it, and so now it's just a kind of a gimmick I have. Just wear the hat. And I don't know, it kind of, some people mention it, some people don't. I think it kind of acts like a filter. Some people like, hey, they just kind of come in and it's like, oh, your hat almost got me there for a second. I'm like, yeah, it's just a hat, bro. It's just a hat. Anyway, that's the hat. I mean, I don't wear this hat outside at all. I literally wear this hat for one thing, making videos, and that's it. Anyway, back on topic, guys. Back on topic. That's not good. No distractions. No distractions. But your favorites did not allow even this to happen. But by their military expedition, or Anglo-Tibetan War, without so much as a thought, knocked this possibility soundly on the head. Okay, so Tibet did get a little ruined, apparently. About this military expedition, I will tell you a little later. Pardon me. And I shall tell you about it chiefly because I myself happened by chance to be an eyewitness of all those lamentable events there. Ooh, Gurdjieff in Tibet confirmed. There's like one guy who was a general who became a theosophist. And he claims that he went to Tibet. And he didn't meet Gurdjieff, but he saw Gurdjieff there dressed as a lama. And he asked, because it was like another foreigner, he asked some of the other monks. And they said, oh, that's Lama Dorjieff. He's, a guy there, and he claims that guy, there was a Western monk there, and he claims that Western monk was Gurdjieff. And it's one of those things. It's like, is that true? Did Gurdjieff really get Tibetan teachings, or is this just another theosophical tall tale? I must first tell you how there on your planet. It is now desired, of course, with the help of the swivel-eyed general, finally to dispatch even the remnants of those two named religions still existing there, which although they are already changed even beyond recognition, yet nevertheless have during the last centuries made the ordinary existence of the three-brained beings there, though very remotely, yet all the same a tiny bit like the ordinary existence of the three-brained beings breeding on the other corresponding planets of our great universe. So he said, even though it was still degenerate, the Tibetan culture was probably more elevated than all of the other degenerate cultures on our planet. And for certain of them, their phenomenally haphazard existence somewhat tolerable objectively. Namely, I shall here tell you how there is just now proceeding the process of the final dispatch of two of the great religions of the five mentioned, now existing, which were founded, though, from bits here and there, nevertheless on the teachings of genuine messengers of our endlessness, himself, our sovereign endlessness. One on the teaching of Saint Jesus, and the other on the teaching of Saint Muhammad. Okay. I repeat that both these great religions there were founded from bits taken here and there from the teachings of two genuine messengers of his endlessness. And though the three-brained beings there of former centuries stripped both these teachings, much as the Russian Sidor stripped his goats, yet nevertheless, some even down to the present time believed in something and hoped for something owing to these teachings, and thereby made their desolate existence a little more bearable. But these contemporary and now arch-strange three-brained beings there have taken upon themselves to sweep this also entirely from off the face of their planet. Wonk wow. Although the process of the strangeness of their peculiar psyche namely the process of the final destruction of these two great religions, began after my departure from their solar system, yet thanks to the contents of an etherogram about the beings of that strange planet, which I received just before our flight from the planet Karatus, I understand how things were, and can now already say with complete conviction that they will no longer stop at stripping them, but without further do entirely destroy even their very traces. Arch strange indeed. Did Gurdjieff predict new atheism? It is in the said etherogram, by the way, it was conveyed to me that there on your planet, first of all, in the city of Jerusalem, at university, a university specially for Jewish youths, was being opened, and secondly, that in the community Turkey, an order was promulgated closing all what are called dervish monasteries, prohibiting men wearing the fez and women the yashmak. So that's just it. There's this weird thing in modern times of this, like, the little bit that you have that's esoteric, that's real, gets stripped away. Like for Christianity, it was Vatican II. It was the intention of Vatican II, or this is for Catholicism in particular, the intention of Vatican II was to bring Christianity back to the world, but instead it opened up and the world came into Christianity. They translated the Latin Mass, and the Mass was no longer done in Latin, and it kind of removed that magical feel. Just ruined everything, bruh. And then in the Islamic world, you know, Sufis and those mysticism, a lot of... It's really weird to think of it, but a lot of the fundamentalist kind of Islamic stuff that was... It's coming... Sufism is coming back nowadays. More interpretation is more open in some Islamic countries now, but that fundamentalism is actually a modern kind of condition. It seems at a certain time in the modern world, the Islamic kind of schools just kind of became skeptical of their own esoteric nature and saw it as degenerate and started stripping that away. And then you just have what? Just the exterior. Just the exterior, nothing else. So it's kind of interesting. It seems that this is what Gurdjieff is pointing out. This loss. There are great wars against, and then of course wars make it worse. Against those beings, followers of other religions, these great wars of theirs called crusades. They produced these wars or crusades in order that the city of Jerusalem, in which this divine teacher Jesus Christ had existed, suffered and died, should become exclusively Christian, and during these crusades of theirs, nearly half the beings of male sex of that continent were completely destroyed. The other half are just going to get jiggy. And now, in this same city of Jerusalem, they have opened their contemporary university for Jewish youths, and almost certainly, too, with the common consent of all those same European Christian communities. Just that nationality is called Jewish, in which the divine Jesus appeared and existed, and the beings of which tortured and crucified him on a cross. Although the present generation of Jews are not direct enemies of Jesus Christ, yet they each also now have the conviction that this Jesus who appeared among their ancestors and came to be regarded as a sacred personality by all the followers of the Christian religion was quite simply a fervent and sick visionary. Yes. It's actually one interesting thing. I know there are a lot of people who don't like historical Jesus, like, he's just a made-up guy. There's one interesting take. The most interesting take I ever heard in defense of a historical Jesus was actually from like a Jewish rabbi who was just saying, like, you listen, like, one of the problems with Jesus comes from the Christians themselves. They want him to be this unique thing. He was the only guy doing what he was doing. And the rabbi was like, no. Like, around that time, there are a whole bunch of these Jewish guys, Honi the Circle Maker, all of this guy. The only one I remember is Honi the Circle Maker, because he sounds so weird. I was like, there was this guy called Honi the Circle Maker who would make a circle and stand in the circle and then would command God to, like, make it rain or something. And it would happen. And he would do... There were all of these miracle workers around this time doing all of these miracles. And he said, like, Jesus wasn't the only guy back then just doing miracles. There were a whole bunch of them. And basically the rabbi defended the historical Jesus narrative, saying, like, if Christianity never became a religion, Jesus would still be preserved in the historical record. He would be there in Jewish midrash, in the midrash literature. Jesus would be there as an obscure rabbi who exorcised demons from people. That's if Christianity didn't exist. That's where you would find him in history. I was like, that's a very interesting take. Very interesting take. Another guy in the chat. Howdy, howdy. It's, yeah. Jesus' supernaturality is the thing we're not positive on. Yeah, well, that's the other thing is there seems to be a conflation of a lot of other things. And I mean, you know, Christianity itself, it's got that Neoplatonic backbone. It's got the Egyptian theology, and then it's got a whole bunch of Mithraic symbolism, and then Jesus himself seems to mirror a lot of aspects of Apollonius of Tyana. If there was a historical Jesus, it seems like that historical Jesus and what's been mixed in after kind of is quite different, and that's the other thing that I find about Christianity. I almost pass off Christianity in some cases as and when I say pseudo, I don't mean it as a negative. It's almost like a half-Aryan religion because of how much Platonic philosophy, you know, Egyptian qualities, Mithraic symbolism, Apollonius of Tyana is in there. Like, so much European stuff has just gone into Christianity. People look at it, you know, like right-wingers. Ironically, I'm wearing this hat. Right-wingers are like, nah, Christianity, we need to become pagan again. It's like, it's basically a pagan religion, bro. It's basically a pagan religion. I've heard that Christianity is just demiurge business. Sure. Yeah, the Mazdakites were also the competitor of the Jesus guy. Yep. The whole thing with Yahweh and El being the sky god. There's some really good scholarship nowadays. Go and look at Alex O'Connor's stuff. He's a skeptic guy, but he did a talk of Justin Sledge. That was good. There's also Gnostic Informant. Check out Neil's work. Some of the stuff he's just done with a bunch of scholars coming out, and like the Yahwehism is really interesting. That stuff's also good. Yeah, check out those guys. What about the Book of Jehu? I like the sigils, Jesus Dream. Yeah, and there's all the Gnostic stuff is there and apparent. But yeah, sorry, I just went off topic there again. Back on topic, guys, back on topic. Among contemporary beings of the planet Earth, a university is just that hearth on which everything acquired during decades and centuries by preceding beings is burned, and upon this hearth, 1.5 day tasty lentil soup is quickly cooked to take the place of everything attained by the centuried conscious and unconscious efforts and labors of their unfortunate ancestors. So Gurdjieff is not looking at the academy in a positive light. There's a line against the academy. What's the line? It's like, the academy is to wisdom what prostitution is to love. It's yeah, there's some problems with universities. This is quite enough to show me and to convince me with my whole being that will eventually become of this Jerusalem now, that they have opened their own famous university, and moreover for Jewish youths. I already see in my mind's eye that before many of their years have passed, there will be on the spot where the planetary body of the divine Jesus was buried, a place for parking contemporary cars that is a parking place for those machines, which for contemporary beings were just the marvel needed to drive them crazy. Furthermore, not only have these sacrilegious beings gradually distorted for their egoistic and political aims the teachings of this divine teacher, but they have now begun to destroy even the memory of it. Dan in the chat says, so I found your channel. I'm kind of confused but intrigued. Anyways, to help me to contextualize these live streams and your videos, should I have to rewatch all the live streams to catch up? I mean, just go to this site here. Gurdjieff.the-work. I'm going on a bit of a Gurdjieff tangent now. I have some other ideas for other books I want to read in the future. Anyway, go to the site, Gurdjieff.work, go down to library, go primary text, and you can get the PDF I'm using. Maybe just start to read through. The early chapters are way easy to read. You'll notice the first couple of live streams I get through like 5 chapters in a night, so that should help to contextualize some of this stuff. But basically, the long and short of it is Beelzebub is an alien on an alien spaceship, and he's talking to his grandson, and his grandson has become fascinated about Earth. And so it's kind of like a description of humanity from an objective point of view, like the aliens are looking at humans and being like, man, these guys are freaking weird. And you're getting a kind of an objective view of the similar thing, like, you ever read like C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters, where it's like two demons talking to each other? And they're like, yes, this is how we shall corrupt humanity. And it's basically a work of psychology. There's something going on here in this work that's similar to that, but it's a work of, what do you call it, esoteric. It's an esoteric work of occult development of man, basically. Dude predicted Israeli traffic jams. See, the issue is that Christianity has arguments against or for a lot of this stuff, but they became so insular they refused to take on challenge just to shut it down. Yeah, that's a shame. They used to, like, take on Jewish literature, and they used to take on like even debate some of the Islamic authors. There used to be some dialogue between like the Islamic East and whatnot, and those were the days. I actually surprised at the mention of Gurdjieff possibly misspelt. I only learnt of him from a video game back in the day. Which video game is that? There's some weird mentions of Gurdjieff in literature. There's like one where, in media, there's like a freaking, not Power Rangers, but like the Super Sentai, like Japanese series? There's like a live action offshoot one where there's like series of like superheroes, like kind of like the Power Rangers. It's Japanese. Can't remember what it's called. But there's, how you have a character that's a bad guy, but then becomes an anti-hero, and then he offshoot, and then he has his own story? In like a movie of one of those characters, that's a bad guy who became an anti-hero, and he kind of has this weird, like, single movie. I watched it on YouTube, and he, like, goes to this city that's being corrupted, and he has to fight this guy called Archangel Michael, who's being controlled by a scientist, and the scientist's name is Gurdjieff. And I'm like, bro, what the frick? How did a Japanese guy find the name Gurdjieff and make, like, this, the crazy Gurdjieff references in media is, like, mad. It's mad, man. Oh, Gurdjieff stuff is completely free? I mean, a lot of it's in public domain. I mean, just PDFs. It's always good to have books, then you can, like, mark stuff down and note it. Did you know God likes things if you do things he likes? Maybe you won't die, and we'll get cool spiritual things. Exactly. Dan says, thank you. Yeah, I hope that answered the question, Dan. Wild Arms. He was a summonable guardian, kind of looks like Godzilla. Lamau. That's pretty funny. So, and there's also Gurdjieff stuff that you'll see around. For some reason, I don't know why, in Lovecraftian games, like games that have Lovecraftian elements to it, like Bloodborne, I'm not sure if it's in Bloodborne actually, but games that have a Lovecraftian feel, sometimes you'll see people using the term Handlanzoid as blood, and I'm like, oh shit, like that's a Gurdjieff term. And like you'll see stuff like that around the place. That's always interesting when that happens. Oh god, you'd get a kick out of Shin Megami Tensei. It's loaded with all sorts of religious entities. Yeah, I mean, the Japanese love doing that stuff. References everything. I learned all my magic from Final Fantasy, says Dylan. Thanks, Sephiroth. Yeah, I know, right? Japanese had a literal band called Black Mages. The Japanese are interesting because they have this really potent tradition, but then they adopt a lot of Western stuff, but then there's this kind of mythologization of Western stuff, and there's this real almost like a thirst for Western esotericism that they have, which they then reinterpret and place into their art. And then it comes to us, and it's this weird Western esotericism through a Japanese kind of lens. It's so weird, man. It's so weird. Anyway, we went way off topic again. Let's get back on it. But there. That also has long been in the style of your favorites. In this connection, I may say that the whole of what is called contemporary civilization there tends only to increase the speed of this machine, invented by them and maleficent just for themselves. Yes, anime is mandatory. And indeed, in the last etherogram I received about the three-brained beings of that ill-fated planet, I was informed, among other things, that a record speed of this machine had already been established there for 325 miles an hour. Of course, such a record will only lead to that already sufficiently trifling size of their ill-fated planet will become, even in their bobtailed being, pictures of reality completely trifling. Well, the Lord Creator be with the my boy. We get a my boy. First my boy of the chapter. Whatever speed they may attain with this machine of theirs, all the same, if they remain as they are, not only they themselves, but even their thought will never go any further than their atmosphere. Gurdjieff not predicting the space race. Now, as regards the second great religion, which was founded, as I have already told you, upon bits here and bits there. So this is the Jewish religion, right? From the teaching of full of hope Saint Muhammad. Okay, no, he's talking about Islam. This religion, from the very beginning of its arising, began to be particularly applied and used for their egoistic and political aims by beings there with Hasnamusian properties, and hence it was the most strict of all. Poor Islam. The power-possessing beings of certain communities there gradually mixed into this divine teaching for their said Hasnamusian aims, such spices of their own invention, that a Shirakuhurian combination resulted, the secret of which would be the envy of all the contemporary famous European, as they are called, pastry cooks and chefs. By the way, Shirahakurian, I said that like off the bat, no hesitation. I should get congratulations for that. That was perfect. I've read so many of these words offhand, just bam, plowed through that one. Thank you. Pat my back. Now, yeah, so he's basically saying he's he's almost like looking at religions now as almost meals. Pastry cooks, chefs, they add spices in, and they get something completely different from what was actually on the menu. And so, but no, my boy, judging by the latter half of the contents of this etherogram, the process of the entire destruction of this second great religion is bound to proceed, or had already proceeded there, on account of that order mentioned in the etherogram promulgated by the power-possessing beings of the community Turkey. The point is, oh yeah, that's interesting, power-possessing beings Turkey. So the whole thing with that, I'm not sure if he knows. So Islam had a golden age, and then it was ruined by the Seljuk Turks, mass converting to Islam, and then coming back in and like ruining everything. But Turkey, then, Ottoman Empire, we had that for a while. Your pronunciation has been great. I've read these words, but never uttered. They are rather entrancing. Yeah, I feel like there's almost something like he's trying to... He has some kind of knowledge of hypnosis, so I wonder if the words, when you speak them out, are supposed to strike the consciousness in a particular way. All these $10 words, making it feel so fancy here. Exactly. Exactly, Prioress. Drop some donations into the chat whenever I pronounce something correct. The point is that this same community of Turkey is one of the largest of all the communities there whose beings profess this religion. I must first of all tell you that from the beginning of the rise of the Mohammedan religion, certain beings of this same community took in the teaching of this religion in its primary form very well, and began gradually to incorporate it into their daily existence. And therefore, although the teaching of this religion was gradually changed under the influence of the power-possessing beings there, nevertheless, among these same certain beings there, this teaching of Muhammad passed from generation to generation in unchanged form. So that's interesting, not from the main centers, but maybe from like the outskirts and the more primitive people. They'll actually have... primitive people, I shouldn't say primitive people, but the lower classes have preserved the teachings of Muhammad better than the higher classes. That's an interesting take. Or maybe some isolated towns there. The Yazidis, of course. Anyway, until now, therefore, there has at least been a faint hope that if sometime these strange beings should suddenly settle down, this teaching would infallibly regenerate and actualize those aims for which it was created, by the full of hope Saint Muhammad. Oh, thank you, Marshall. Thank you. I try to be as entrancing as possible. Mwah. So, my boy. We get our so, my boy. These same certain beings there were called dervishes, and it was concerning the closing of just their monasteries that the order was indeed given in that contemporary community, Turkey. Okay, so he has a lot of respect for dervishes. So dervishes preserve the teachings better than normal Muslims. Of course, by the destruction in Turkey of this dervishism, those last dying sparks will also be entirely extinguished there. Pseudo was a primitive way of recovering lost bread. Why, thank you, Dylan. Thank you for the donation. Which, preserved as it were in the ashes, might sometime rekindle the hearth of those possibilities upon which Saint Muhammad counted, for which he had hoped. And as regards the other order communicated to me in that etherogram and promulgated in that same community, Turkey, namely the prohibition upon beings of the male sex to wear the formerly famous fez, and upon beings of the female sex, the yashmak. Is a yashmak an actual thing? I know the fez is that, like, hat that all the Shriners wear. Yashmak. Okay. Okay. Nice. Like, so it's like a nice veil. Yeah, bro. We got to get all the girls wearing this up. Nah. Nah, dog. Okay, but yeah, this is so not like a full burqa thing, but something like this. Very tasteful. Or is it? Wait, what is it? This is actually confusing me now. Which one's that? I think maybe something. Yeah, okay. Well, he says, there we go, racial Turkey. Something like this. Yes. Yes. Turkish women wearing a veil. Makes them look nice and regal. I'd totally wear it, says Hazel. Hell yeah. Get your trad wife on. Now, back to back. So, and men aren't allowed to wear fezzes. That's a shame. The consequences of these innovations are very clearly depicted in my being pictures about the future. You know what's interesting? I remember someone, I know a guy who's quite Gurdjieffian, and he bought a fez once and, like, meditated with it, and he claims that, like, the fez, or when you wear something on your head, specifically meditate, it hits specifically, like, pressure points, and actually can help with certain things. I think I hope you don't mind me sharing this, just in case he's watching. I think his experience was he was, like, trying to meditate and he just couldn't get anywhere, and then, like, he had his window open in his room and the wind blew suddenly. He was like, oh, why is it so hard? And as he asked that of himself, the wind blew and the, like, curtain flicked over, like, he had, like, a pile of clothes and it flicked something on his pile, and, like, he had a fez on top of it that he bought, and it fell on the ground and rolled in front of him. And he was like, huh. And so he put it on and kept meditating, and that was his kind of claim, at, like, the pressure of it kind of helps hit some pressure points and aided in his meditation. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So I wonder if there's something about the fez that's esoteric. And yeah, and then it preserves itself in the dervishes preserve it, and also the Shriners, the Masons, also preserve it. Their weird fez wearing. What happens if you meditate with a baseball cap? Nah. Baseball caps just they hit the wrong pressure points, man. They hit the wrong pressure points. The consequences of this innovation being very clearly depicted. Okay, I read that. Anyway, thanks to these innovations, there is no doubt but that exactly the same will be repeated with the beings of this Turkey, as occurred to the beings of the large community Russia after they had also begun to imitate everything European. Esoteric baseball cap-ism. Yes, we need to begin this. Meditate with the rosary 3 times your gains. Hell yeah. But you got to do it all natty, everyone. Don't get too carried away with supplements. It may be noted, for example, that indeed, in all the beings of that large community Russia, only 1 or 2 centuries ago, before they had yet begun to imitate everything European, these two being functions still obtained, which are called Martardamlik and Namuslik, or as these being feelings are still called, the feeling of religiousness and the feeling of patriarchality. Okay. There's also a Masonic group called the Grotto. It's like the poor man's shrine, where they wear a black fez. Okay, that's interesting. But anyway, these terms here are interesting because it says the large group Russia only 2 centuries ago, before that began to imitate everything European, these two being functions still obtained. So religiousness and patriarchality, are these good being functions though? Let's see what he says. So the feeling of religiousness and a feeling of patriarchality. And it was just those same being feelings which a couple of centuries ago made the beings of that large community famous among other beings of the whole of this planet in respect of their morality and patriarchality, of their family foundations. Okay, so they may not be good in a moral, or maybe they are good in a moral sense, that's the whole thing. They just create a kind of cohesiveness without, now that they're gone, it just kind of things disintegrate. But when afterwards they began imitating everything European, both these being feelings, still remaining in them, began gradually to atrophy in them. And now at the present time, almost all the beings of the community have become, in the sense of religiousness and patriarchality, such the notion of which our wise teacher Mullah Nasruddin expresses by the exclamation, get along with you. In Russia, moreover, none of this began with the yashmak or the fez. No, the headdresses were not worn there. But it was begun there with the beard of the beings of the male sex. For the three-brained beings of the male sex, there the beard is the same as our tail for us, which, as you already... So Beelzebub has a tail. Once again, these are beings from another place. You already know, adds to the beings of the male sex among us masculinity and activity. Ah, okay, so the bigger the tail, the bigger the man. And so, you know, the bigger the beard your boys have got, the more manly he is. When two beards cross paths, the larger one has right of way. It is now the turn of these unfortunate Turks. Once they have proposed to change their fezzes for European bowlers, the rest will follow of itself. I don't know, man. Bowlers can be esoteric, right? Of course, the psyche of these Turkish beings will also soon degenerate, as it degenerated in the beings of the community Russia. The difference between the Russian beings and the Turks is only in this, that for the Russians, one being only, namely their Tsar, was the cause of this transformation of their psyche. Whereas for the beings of the community of Turkey, several beings were its cause. Okay, that's interesting. Getting cultural here. And there were several because these Turks recently changed their old many-century established state organization for a new one, a certain special republican form. And in place of one ruler, as had obtained among them, their former state organization, there are several. So this goes into the criticization of basically a monarchy versus a democracy, where people say if you have a monarchy, yeah, but flatterers will surround your monarch. And the counter to that is, yeah, but if you have a democracy and you have a council of people, you don't negate flattery, you just multiply the amount of flatterers there are. And red tape and bureaucracy becomes worse in some cases, which is true. We're pro-monarchy on this channel, are we? Are we though? Anyway. Even if this former state organization of theirs was bad, yet to counterbalance this, there was a single ruler who introduced innovation solely for his community, and furthermore, all of them old, patriarchal. Now in this community of Turkey, of the chief leaders, there are several, and each of them is a wiseacre, who forces upon the unfortunate ordinary beings of the whole of this community his callousness, not responding at all either to the already long ago crystallized needs of the psyche of the beings of this community, or to their established pillars of their being morality. Most esoteric attire is a suit and top hat and a cane. Hell yeah. Hell yeah, Dylan. I agree. Not just because you paid me $2. That's a 100%. 100%. Everyone else who agrees with Dylan also donate and stream. It is very interesting to notice further that just a formula, top hats are esoteric. Top hats, anything. Here's the thing, actually. Let me just defend. I'm going to go off on a tangent. Defend the top hat as an esoteric thing. When you look back at like old priest casts, what do you see? You always see hats that go upwards. Like, you know, the Egyptian, like, kind of the crowns are all like up, and like, you know, the Pope's hat that mimics the fish, it goes up. You see all of these, you know, they cone shape, they always go up, they point upwards. There's that thing, if you look up, like, what is it, the pagan European, like, priest cap, and it's like a giant pointed, I don't know what to type in to get it up. It's like a giant pointed kind of cap, and it's golden. It's like there's this thing about your head and extending it higher. So like a top hat and like a high top hat is a continuation of an esoteric tradition, a subconscious one, where we're trying to like extend our head so we can kind of draw in, like, exactly. Abraham Lincoln was esoteric for wearing a top hat. We got to get our esoteric top hatisms going. Next time I do a public talk, I should wear a top hat just for the lols. Anyway, sorry guys. Sorry for that tangent. It is very interesting to notice further that just as formerly the Russian Tsar was supplied by his nearest old patriarchal functionaries with a great quantity of what is called money, obtained by the sweat of the peasants, and was sent to the continent of Europe to study in the various communities, there are a great number of methods of government in order that when he returned, he might the better orient himself in the ruling of his community. So likewise, these present Callo-Turkish rulers were also provided by their own patriarchal fathers with much money, this time, however, obtained by the sweat of their Kaivansananax. There we go. I'm going with that. Oh, hello. This one is for the Esoteric Memes video. It was my favorite introduction to the channel, and I really appreciate your treatment of Boyd Rice, whom I am very fond of. Oh, okay. Hey! Also picked up Kenneth Grant's book because of your video. Oh, nice. Thank you, Voices. Thank you. Yeah, no problem. I mean, yeah, like, I've never met Boyd Rice. I didn't know who he was before that video. So, like, I mentioned in the video, it took me ages to find it. I was like, oh. But, like, I found him, I was like, oh, this guy seems, like, so wacky and, like, quirky and cool. And, like, it surprised me that, like, you know, he was a LaVey Satanist, but he actually had some esoteric substance. I was like, yeah, I'll go for it. Yeah, Grant seems interesting. Some of the, I kind of, you know, I've got too much stuff to read, but yeah, I'd also wouldn't mind reading some of his, going through the nine book gate cycle. That would be really interesting. And Tyler, thank you. Yeah, Jesus Christ, this word. He better not say this again. Good Lord. Okay. Damn, I wish I could donate, but my debit card has transaction problems. That's fine, Marshall. It's fine. You don't need to donate. You don't need to. But thank you, everyone who does. And also sent to the continent Europe to receive there what they call a good education for the future welfare of their fatherland. Ansoma boy, another Ansoma boy. This is like whenever Beelzebub says this is like a checkpoint in his work. And Ansoma boy, just to like refresh you and bring you back to consciousness. In both these cases, because their future rulers of the two large many-millioned communities went to the continent of Europe quite young, and had not yet at all become aware of their responsibility, but chiefly thanks to this, that they were provided with money from the said source, the existence of the beings there on the continent Europe was absorbed and permanently crystallized in them, so splendiferous and beneficial, that when afterwards, on account of the abnormally established conditions of existence in their country, they became leaders of their many-million communities, they, like the Russian Tsar, could not help aiming to make the existence of their compatriots to their bobtailed nation happy as well. Jesus Christ. I think what he's mentioning there is rulers paying to send their kids to another country for education, and when their kids come back and become rulers, they are more like their another country than their home country, and then that culture trickles down into their own country and kind of corrupts their own people. Much good, by the way. The present chief rulers of this community, Turkey, saw and absorbed in the community Germany, to which they were sent for the purpose of studying what is called militarism, that is the special finesses for directing the process of reciprocal destruction. It's funny. That's very interesting. There's even back then there's a Turkish-German connection. I remember meeting an Iranian guy who said, like, you know, like Iran and kind of Jews, and he said, like, he was telling me something about how, like, they view, like, Hitler, and he said, yeah, all the Iranian people, they love Germans, and he said, in World War II, or before then, like, Germany and Iran had, like, this weird connection, and he said, if you look at all of the old train stations and a lot of the infrastructure, it's all German-made. And he said it was from that time period the Germans kind of laid down a bunch of infrastructure, and so they all remember the Germans fondly. And of course, they still use that infrastructure. Nothing new has happened because of Iran's corrupt politicians. Like, it's very hard to put new stuff in that lasts. And so the stuff that they have that still works, it's all the old German stuff from back in the day. And it's like there's this weird connection with, like, the Germans and the Muslim community. Also, you always see that meme where it's like a Turkish nationalist posting online about how good Turkey is from his apartment in Berlin. Like, yeah, even nowadays, there's still that thing. This relationship still lingers. This donation is on behalf of the martial esotericist. Read his following comment with. Okay, thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Dylan, for donating on behalf of martial esotericist. There you go, Marshall. There you go. Okay, that is why these present chief rulers of the community of Turkey existed a long time in the community Germany, and where for a considerable time they're what are called junkers. That's interesting. And this is also an interesting connection between, you know, like Sudettendorf and Turkey and all of that. There's that connection that comes up again. That's interesting that there really was this strong link there between Turkey and Germany. Pardon me. Oof. Especially much good indeed they saw and absorbed in that Germany, in its capital Berlin, on the street called Unter den Linden. I wonder if this is has some kind of secret meaning behind it. Let's see what's up. Is this just an actual street? Unter den Linden is a block. Is a boulevard in the central mid-district of Berlin. Okay, so no, okay. He's just straight up quoting German streets now. What is does that actually mean something if we go translate? Is named after linden trees. Okay. Wait. Oh, under the linden trees. Okay, that's interesting. Very interesting. Oh, spicy literature in the chat's getting mentioned. I like a little bit of Stephen Flowers every now and then as well. Anyway, I do not yet know what future benefactions these new Turkish rulers will create for their compatriots. But meanwhile, They have already done their fatherland one very, very good patriotic deed. Okay. Thoroughly to understand the essence of this patriotic deed, you must first know that in the capital of this community, Turkey, in the streets and alleys of those quarters called Galata or Galatia and Pera. Galatia and Persia. All the female beings of a special designation used to belong to foreign communities. Ooh. Though these same women earned and spent genuine Turkish lire. The hell is this? What is this meaning? Lire. No, I don't care about that. Lire, refer, monitor. Okay, so money. It's a money. It's a money thing. Okay. A French currency as well. So there's lots of foreign women in Turkey around this time. What happens to them? What is this? What's going on here? But thanks to the recent innovations, they have now come to the full and certain hope that very soon these genuine patriotic Turkish lire of theirs will no longer be at the disposal or use of the female beings of any foreign community alien to them, but will be used only by their own dear she compatriots. Is he alluding that the Turkish men were using foreign prostitutes and their patriotism is now making them use only their own women as prostitutes? Is that what he's saying? It is not for nothing that our highly esteemed Haji Nasruddin says, what is most important is to have plenty of money, and then even our namus may creak. Namus. What's going on here? Okay, we're just going to Google Translate all of these. Namus? No, namus. Give me the namus. Namuses? Namos? The hell is a namus? What if we go detect language? Nothing. Nothing. Gurdjieff trolling me again. Oh, lira, of course. That's how you pronounce that better. Yeah. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you. Or sometimes, in cases, he also says in Turkish itself. Wait, is this a Turkish phrase? Like, actually? I'm not gonna pronounce that. Could it have been typoed? Meh, possibly, but they've really done a lot of work in trying to translate this properly, so I doubt it. I think Gurdjieff oversaw some of the translations as well. Sorry, which saying in English means world deeds are like honey cakes, from which the eater must grow an ass's tooth. What does that even mean? I think he's saying they have makeup now, so they are being more patriotic, but I could be misunderstanding. Oh, yeah, that's a good, thank you, Crim Dim. That's also a well, that's also an interpretation, yeah. Now, let us talk about what I promised to tell you a little more in detail, namely about the teachings of the last sacred individual who appeared among the beings of Tibet, Saint Lama, and about the causes of the complete destruction of that teaching also. The teaching and preachings of this Saint Lama were not so widely spread there because of the geographical conditions of that locality where he appeared, and where he taught. Those unfortunate three-centered beings also what they must do to free themselves from the consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabhafa. On account of its geographical conditions, beings of this country were little in touch, as I have already told you, with the abnormal conditions of ordinary being existence of the beings of other communities, and in consequence certain of them were more receptive of teaching of this last sacred individual, and this teaching, therefore, just entered into their essence and began gradually to be actualized already in practice also. And so, my boy, during many years, their circumstances gradually so arranged themselves that in that country called Tibet, the local beings became grouped according to their degree of their inner transubstantiation of the teaching of this Saint Lama, and according to the degree of their need to work upon themselves, having correspondingly organized their ordinary existence, they, thanks to their isolated environment, due to this inaccessibility of their country, for beings of other countries, had the possibility of working without hindrance according to the instructions of Saint Lama, upon their liberation from the consequences of the properties of that organ which their first earliest ancestors of their common misfortune were forced to have. So they did good work. And it seems that their society stratified into basically layers of different people at different levels of kind of purification of Kunda Buffer. So that's interesting. Certain beings among their number had already attained such a deliverance. Many others were already on the path of this attainment, while many of them were hopeful and of one day also reaching the way of this achievement. But just saw this on my feed. Glad I did. Thank you, Charity Jones. Welcome. But just when the conditions and environment for productive work in this direction had at last taken a definitive turn in the right direction in this Tibet, well, it was just then that happened, thanks to which the possibility for the beings of this country also of one day freeing themselves from the misfortune oppressing them had to perish completely, or at any rate be again delayed for many years. But before telling you about just what happened there, you must still know the following. Only a few centuries ago, the chief particularity of the three-brained beings who please you, namely the process of their periodic reciprocal destruction, used to proceed there on your planet between beings of different communities of one and the same continent, namely the continent on which they bred, and if occasionally by exception this process arose between beings of different continents, then it occurred only between beings dwelling on the neighboring borders of two adjacent continents, and this was because locomotion by water was still very difficult for terrestrial beings some centuries ago. But after a contemporary being there had a chance to discover the possibility of using the power of artificially rarefied water for such locomotion, or as they say, the power of steam, Industrial Revolution, baby, and had devised suitable vessels for the purpose. For that purpose, these terrestrial beings thereafter just began going for such purposes to other borderlands of the neighboring continents, or even to other continents. During the last century, one of these favorite places on another continent for the beings of this peculiar planet was that the country of ancient Gemchania, or as a contemporary beings say there, India. Do you remember that I once told you that to that self-same Gemchania of the continent Arshak, now Asia, beings of the continent Atlantis used to sail in the beginning for pearls, and how later that it was also they who first populated that country? Yes, yes. Pearl Land back in the day. That's what India was. So, my boy, this same unfortunate former Gemchania, now India, has become during recent centuries the favorite place also of the contemporary beings of the continent Europe, but this time for their processes of reciprocal destruction. They began to sail there and there to produce their processes of reciprocal destruction, both among themselves and with the beings breeding there, that is to say, either beings of one European community strove to destroy the existence of beings belonging to another also European community, or similar processes proceeded between local beings, with the European beings helping one side or the other side. So this is like the, the destruction of India, between like all the European countries came, and then you had all these different factions, and different Indian lords were fighting internally in lands with inland with each other, and the different European factions were competing with each other. He's basically describing that process here. The East India Company era and all that stuff. The processes of reciprocal destruction of local character there in the unfortunate Gemtania were very frequent, especially during the last 18 or 15 centuries. Ooh. And this was so, firstly because in consequence of a similar great process, the beings there who had earlier belonged to only 2 different communities, split into a great number of independent small communities. And secondly, because there also then occurred such a combination in the general psyche of beings of that locality that the fits of this property, and namely the striving for reciprocal destruction, occurred in the beings of that part of the surface of the planet Earth, everywhere, not simultaneously, but at different times. And this further new combination of their general psyche occurred also. So he's splitting up the population of India. That's interesting. Wonder if, because the Muslim conquests kind of created a, what would you call it? The Muslims would have been a cohesive community there, and then it would have just been Muslims and everyone else. So now it's like once that gets taken out, or the linchpin gets taken out, all the different communities there just scatter, or, you know, you have Jews down there, you have Hindus, but then you have all the different Hindu sects, you have Jainism, you've got a whole bunch of other things going on. You've got Buddhists as well. A lot of the different Vedic yogic sects. So the fracturization of India. And further, the new combination of their general psyche occurred also thanks to a slight unforeseen misunderstanding connected with the common harmonic movement of the whole of that solar system. I will sometime explain to you also about the details of that misunderstanding, and meanwhile, let us return to our tale we have begun, and thus. That part of the surface of the planet Earth occupied by India has remained in respect of natural wealth the same in recent centuries as formerly. And therefore, when in the peculiar psyche of the European beings who had gone to that country for the process of reciprocal destruction, the need to carry on this terror had passed, those beings stayed on there and either prepared themselves for subsequent similar processes, or, as they say, earned enough to send the required goods for the ordinary existence of their families who had remained on the continent Europe. So now this is English partition India for reals. And all kinds of goods they earned there by means of their trades, consisting for the most part of manufacturing what are called copper buttons, hand mirrors, bead earrings, bracelets, and various other gewgaws. Now that's a term you're probably never going to hear in a while, for which it appeared the beings of that country also had a weakness. Quite from the beginning of this period, the beings of the continent Europe began in various ways to take from the local beings there in Gemchania their lands, also on which they begun to exist, just as on the continent Europe, in separate groups according to the community from which they had emigrated. So India started to become more like Europe in the sense that it broke into pieces. I mean, you know, like India and Pakistan used to be one country, and then the first prime minister of Pakistan was just like, nah, screw these guys, let's have an all-Muslim country. There's some story about that, like, he died like 10 days later, and if he didn't die, that division would have never been made. Quite interesting. There's interesting history down there. But yeah, there's this tragic breaking to pieces of this country. And not just the breaking to pieces of the country, it mimics this fracturing of their psyche there. And which then allows for more reciprocal destruction. These beings from different communities of Europe continued also to manifest there toward each other the kind of strange being relationship which beings of one European community manifested then and still continue to manifest towards beings belonging to other communities of the same continent, namely thanks to the consequences of the properties of the organ Kunda buffer, they cultivate feelings which had been crystallized in them into the form of particular functions existing there under the name of envy, jealousy, sandor, i.e. wishing the death of weakness of others, and so on. Okay. It's an interesting word. And there in Gemchania, two beings, there in Gemchania 2, beings of one community began to pipe with full blast against beings of another community that Hasnamusian music they call policy. Policy. is a Hasnamusian creation. That is, they began to criticize each other, to lower each other's standing, to down each other, and so on, their aim being to create what is called prestige among the local beings in relation to their own community. In the course of such a policy, one of the heads of a certain Europe community in some way or other learned the secret how to influence the psyche of beings of other communities, to acknowledge the authority and give supremacy to the beings of his own community. Afterwards, when the beings who had learned this secret, the principle of the action of which was called Svaznel, or inciting one against the other, initiated the other heads of this community into it, and they all made it the basis of their policy. Then indeed the beings of this community began everywhere and in everything to obtain predominance. Although both the former heads of the beings of this community and also that being himself who had hit upon the secret Svaznel already long ago perished, yet subsequent generations continuing now of the course automatically to employ this secret gradually not only took into their own hands almost the whole of this Gemchania, but also subordinated to their influence the very essence of all the beings breeding on that part of the planet Earth. Interesting. Damn, policy and legislation are cringe for Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff is a based anarchist. Damn straight. An ontological anarchist. I mean, you know, when he was in Russia, he was dissing that policy of like going around that and trying to get a form so he could practice medicine. So Dan says, so Svaznel is the appeal to authority rhetorical tool. I love that. Yeah, it's interesting. It also seems to be, I wonder if he's talking about some kind of, not creation of the caste, because the castes were there before, but this appeal, which kind of create, you know, the downing of others, or bringing someone to your level and creating policy for one. And it's like there's this crystallization of the caste system there as well. And it captures all of the beings, the very essence of all of the beings breeding on that part of the earth. So yeah, I wonder if this is also a reflection on the caste system. In spite of the fact that 2 centuries had passed, yet at that period on which my further tales refers, concerning the destruction by contemporary beings of the labors of Saint Lama, it all continued in the same way. Having become proud of their success, the recent heads of that mentioned European community, who had the luck, thanks to this same secret Svaznel alone, gradually to subordinate all their influence and to grasp everything into their hands, wished to lay their paws even on that which until then been considered unsustainable. Namely, they decided to take possession of also that neighboring country called Tibet, Lamau, which was then considered to be inaccessible, and therefore one day for them, fine, but for all the rest of the beings of that planet, a sorry day. They assembled many beings of their community, and still more from among the number of small local communities already conquered by them, and with the help of every possible new invention of their contemporary European civilization, for the process of reciprocal destruction, they began very quietly to move towards this country hitherto considered inaccessible. In spite of the help of these new European inventions of every kind, this movement of theirs up country was very difficult and cost them very dearly, not only in what they call their pounds, but also in what they call their casualties. While this crowd of every possible kind of terrestrial 3-brained being still quietly but against great difficulties moved up, the beings themselves, who dwelled above in Tibet, as yet suspected nothing whatever of what these European beings called in their military expedition against their country. And they learned about it only when that mob was already up. When the beings of this high country learned of this unusual event, they immediately became alarmed and agitated, because they had grown accustomed to the notion during many centuries that the place of their existence was inaccessible to anybody, and that beings of other communities, no matter what might be their means of process of reciprocal destruction, would be unable to penetrate to them in any way. That's what we need. We need a place that's inaccessible to anyone else. so that we can practice without people interfering. So certain were they of this that they had not even once cast a glance downwards to see what was being done during the time in respect of the aim of penetrating into their inaccessible country, and hence they did not take any corresponding measures in advance. It was from this that the sorrowful events subsequently came, which were finally to destroy all the results created by that full of faith sacred individual Saint Lama. First of all, it is necessary to tell you that this country was a place of existence also of that small group consisting of 7 beings there, who, according to the rules established from the very beginning, were guardians of the most secret instructions of the and last counsels of Saint Lama. This group consisted of these 7 beings who, following their indications of Saint Lama for freeing themselves from the consequences of the properties of the organs of Kunda Buffer, had brought their self-perfecting up to the final degree. Okay, so there was 7 beings that actually achieved a really high level. When this group of beings of 7 learned of this event, it dispatched the chief among them to join the agitated chiefs of the whole country in a conference which took place in the capital on the day of the arrival of these uninvited guests from below. The assembled heads of the Tibetan beings unanimously decided at this first conference of theirs very peaceably, and courteously to request these uninvited visitors to return whole and hearty from where they had come, and to leave in peace both themselves and their peaceful country, what did not harm anybody. When after several days it became clear that these uninvited guests would not consent to return, but as a consequence of this request, even hastened to move forward deeply into the country, the members of the first council became even more alarmed, arranged a second council, so bureaucracy at its best. The first council didn't work. We need another council to begin to deliberate what to do to prevent these beings from entering, as it is said, a stranger's house without invitation. A quantity of every sort of means were proposed for removing from their country these beings who had broken like ravens into a stranger's nest, but one in particular found support to destroy utterly to the last man all these uninvited swaggerers. Yes, good. And this, my boy, could have indeed been easily done, because such is the country that without any additional means, merely by stones thrown down from the mountains, a single being could destroy thousands of enemies, beings passing along the valleys, and especially was this possible because every one of them knew the lay of the land, the lie of his native country like the palm of his hand. By the close of the conference, all the heads of the country of Tibet had become so excited that they would almost certainly have decided to carry out the proposal supported by the majority, if the head of that small group of 7, who, as I have already told you, had been sent to this council by the other members, had not intervened in this stormy council. This head of the 7, and he joins cults in the chat. What are we reading? Beelzebub's tales to his grandson, and this is a hard part. Jesus Christ. He's going off on Tibet. Later, a saint, while persuading the other participants in this conference that what they had proposed must not be done, said among other things, the existence of every being is equally precious. What a liberal. And dear to our common Creator God. Therefore, the destruction of these beings, so great a number of them too, would give no small grief to that one, who even without this is overburdened with the care and sorrow of all that exists among us on earth. What a liberal. Disgusting. All that this future saint then said in the assembly of Tibetan chiefs was so generally pervasive that they decided not only to take no measures against the strangers, but even to take every kind of precaution that no one should hinder the march of their events. Blue-pilled. Blue-pilled. Thereupon, the beings appearing from below as uninvited guests, meeting with no opposition there, moved forward there into the heart of that unique country, which hitherto had been isolated from all the conditions of the ordinary being existence, growing always worse on your planet. Well then, there just proceeded that which resulted in a great calamity, not only... Andy dropping some money. Thank you, Andy. Not only for all present and future beings of this unlucky country, but perhaps even for all in general present and future three-brained beings of the whole of that unfortunate planet. Alas, alas, this is what it does to you kids. Liberalism not even once. The point is that at the final conference of the heads of the whole of Tibet, a resolution was carried by the way that certain members of the council, chosen by a lot, should go to those districts through which these foreign beings would pass in order to warn in advance the local population of the considered decision of their leaders and persuade them to put nobody under any circumstances to hinder the passing of these foreigners. Among the number of those sent to the districts through which the foreign armed beings would pass, the choice fell upon the chief also of this group of 7. And when this future saint arrived for the purpose of mentioned at one large point near which the armed crowd of foreign beings had camped for a needed rest, a stray bullet fired intentionally or accidentally in the street of this large point by one of these newcomers from below killed on the spot this future saint. God damn. God damn. In this way ended the existence of the chief of the small group of the nearly perfected brothers, and overcome by the terror of such an event, nothing more remained for them but only to take all the necessary steps to bring home the planetary body of their former chief. In order that you may clearly represent to yourself the real terror of the situation experienced by the 6 brothers who were left without their chief, and also well understand all the resulting calamitous consequences, I must first of all explain to you, even though briefly, the history of the rise and existence of this country named Tibet. I thought this chapter was on religion. Of this small group, which had always consisted of 7 three-brained beings on your planet, this group was formed and existed long before the appearance of the planet Earth, of the last sacred individual, Saint Lama. On the planet Earth, okay. So the group of 7 in Tibet existed before Saint Lama came. So he's alluding that before Buddhism came, there was a group of 7 that were mystics that ruled everything. So maybe we're talking about Bon shamans, or the Bon religion here. Bon sorcerers, I should say, not shamans. From very early times, it was composed of 7 beings, directly initiated by Saint Krishnatkarna, also a messenger of our endlessness. Okay, so some kind of Vedic influence moved up. Endlessness specially sent to the 3-centered beings of the planet Earth, breeding in the country Jamchania. When Saint Buddha afterwards appeared there in Jamchania and made clear that many instructions of Saint Krishnatkarna were not yet obsolete for the psyche of the beings of that same country, not yet or now obsolete anyway, and that these instructions were, when absorbed by any of the beings there, contribute to the destruction of the consequence of the organ. Consequence the Bon sorcerers, not bunny sorcerers, prayers. B-O-N, or the B has umlauts on it, so bun, or something like that. Bon. Or maybe even bo. Bo. Sometimes you see it written as bon po or bonzo as well. Maybe that's some kind of dialect. Anyway. Properties of the organ Kundabuffer to help them in freeing themselves, from which he had himself also been sent to them. And when he decided to put these instructions of Saint Krishnatkarna as a whole into the basis of his own teaching, also, then these 7 beings there, initiated directly by Saint Krishnatkarna, after Buddha had taught them the aim and necessity of their existence, and they had clearly sensed this and were convinced that the instructions of Saint Buddha not only at heart did not contradict the instructions of Saint Krishnatkarna, but even corresponded more perfectly to the psyche of the beings of that given period, became followers of Saint Buddha. There you go. And still later, when Saint Lama appeared especially for the beings of that country, Tibet, and he also, in his turn, found that many instructions of Saint Buddha would still correspond very well with the psyche of the beings of that country, if only certain changes of detail were admitted into them corresponding to the change in external conditions of existence which had been brought about under the influence of time. He therefore also put into the basis of his teaching many instructions from the varieties pointed out already by Saint Krishnakarna before him and renewed by Saint Buddha. Then this small group initiated beings, as well as other groups already followers of Buddha, having also clearly sensed that the additions and changes brought to his teachings by Saint Lama correspond better to the contemporary psyche, become followers of Saint Lama. Among the beings of this small group, there existed a rule, which, by the way, they kept very strictly in accordance with which certain secret instructions of Saint Lama concerning the beings of their group were transmitted from generation to generation through their chief alone. And he could initiate into these secrets the six only after certain attainments on their part. So if you kill the seventh guy, the six are screwed. That's how it happens. That's how it always happens. That is just why all six members of this small organization, all of whom had already merited and were ready to be accepted for initiation in the near future, were so horrified, as I have said, when they learned about the destruction of their chief. With the destruction of this, at that time, sole initiate, there was lost to them forever the possibility of becoming initiated in the secret instructions of Saint Lama. Owing to the fact that the destruction of their chief proceeded so unexpectedly, that sole remaining possibility became even doubtful for them of receiving these instructions by communicating with the reason of the destroyed chief by means of the process, the sacred almsnoshinu. Ooh, hello. For the existence of which they not only knew the possibilities, but they also had in themselves all the data required for such an actualization. You probably, my dear boy, know nothing yet about this sacred process. That process is called the sacred almsnoshinu. Jesus. By means of which three... Okay, here we go. Here we go, guys. We're getting back to the Kesdjan body. This is important. Attention now. Themselves had time to coat and to bring their own Kesdjan body up to completed functioning and to a definite degree of reason. So this process called this is the means by which we use not to coat ourselves with a higher being body, but once we have a higher being body, this process makes it go further. We get objective reason, or maybe we coat a higher mental body instead of just an astral body. Intentionally produce the coating, or as it is otherwise said, the materialization of the body Kesdjan, of any being already entirely destroyed to such a density that this body acquires again for a certain time the possibility of manifesting in certain of its functions proper to its former planetary body. Oh, okay, no, and it coats the Kesdjan body in such a way that you can thicken it and you can appear physically to people. So this is, a master dies, their physical body dies, but then their astral body is just immortal and they're just hanging out. But you can also go to your followers and condense your astral body to a point that your followers can still see you as a physical being. That's really interesting. This Kesdjan process can be produced upon the body Kesdjan of that being who also during his existence had brought his higher being body up to the completed functioning, and in whom in addition, pardon me, the reason of this body had been brought up to that degree called the sacred being Mirozino. So this also gives us hope for, even if masters die, we may be able to still meet them. Even if the teachers are all dead, we should still be able to collect ourselves and to develop ourselves up to a point where perhaps we can connect to them internally and they can even speak to us physically. Like Gurdjieff himself appears before us in Like, not in a vision, but he just condenses his astral body and gives us the extra teachings we need, you know, that kind of thing. In our great universe, besides the process of the intentional coating of the being body, Kesdjan, of an already destroyed being, another process exists called the most sacred... Oh boy. Jerimetli. Got that one. I got that one. And this most sacred process consists in this, that when there is intentionally first produced the coating of the highest being body, namely the body of the soul, the causal body, only afterwards, as in the case, is this sacred alms noshino produced. Okay, so you need a Kesdjan body, you need to crystallize the mental body, and then once you have the soul body, the causal body, then you go back and your Kesdjan body can then be crystallized to that point, can be thickened to that point that a person with just physical eyes can see it. It is possible, of course, to produce both these processes, only in that case, if such higher being bodies are still in those spheres contactable by the sphere of that planet on which these sacred sacraments are produced. In addition, these formations evoked intentionally and consciously by definite beings can exist and maintain connection and communication with them only as long as the beings who produce these formations consciously feed the body Kesdjan with their own sacred hello. Skaldan. So that may be... This is interesting. This is very interesting. We're getting here. So the Kesdjan body, even after we die, still needs to be fed. And even if we reach the Kesdjan body, we still need to continuously feed it. We need to give it maintenance. So you do esoteric practices like meditation, but even after you attain, you still need to practice meditation to kind of maintain it. Thus, those 6 remaining members of the small group of 7 might have had recourse to this same process, alms noshino, for communication with the reason of their destroyed chief, if they, having foreseen the possibility of the sudden decease of their chief, had made beforehand, while he still existed, a certain preparation necessary for completing this process. In order that you may understand about the essence of this preparation for this sacred process, the sacrament alms noshino, it is necessary for you to know about the 2 particular properties of the being Hamblenzoin, so the blood of the astral body. The blood of the being body Kesdjan. Yes, yes. In the first of these properties of the being Hamblenzoin consists in this, that if any part of it is separated and removed, then wherever and however far it may be taken, a thread-like connection is formed between this part. Hence blood brothers. You tie your astral bodies together when you mix blood with someone. And the fundamental concentration of all this cosmic substance in such a way that this connection is formed of this same substance, and its density and thickness increase and diminish proportionally with the distance between the fundamental concentration of this substance and its separated part. Oh, voice in the wilderness. I'm a Freemason for 15 years and have studied religion and the occult for almost 30 years. Hence my interest in the channel. Now that's based. Pretty based, man. Ugh. So that's interesting. So he's talking about the threads between astral bodies can be connected via the blood. And the Hamblenzoin is also in our physical blood. So when you mix your physical blood with another person's and, drink it in a blood rite, you literally tie your Kesdjan bodies together. I wonder if the Kesdjan must be fed like the Lua must be fed in Vudon. I'm not sure. I don't know what the Lua is. I'm not like well versed on Vudon. But it's out of the Kesdjan is fed on this specific substance, the Aeskaldon, which may be a transmuted form of Exioheri. The Exioheri being literal sexual substance, but there's a transmutated substance that comes out of it. Because here's the thing, the Kesdjan body in other chapters, we've seen it being fed on multiple things, like on the elements, on planetary rays, on transmuted impressions that you transmute through your own awareness and self-remembering. But also there's this mention of the exiohari, the sexual substance. Like, hence why, you know, in some esoteric systems that make you chase and you transmute, like with breathwork, sexual energy up your spine. That seems to also be connected with the crystallization of the Kesdjan body. Mr. Ruark, the Freemasons are after you now because of the Masonic counter-conspiracy video. That video is just there because I'm like, I see so many bad Masonic conspiracy videos, or just Masonic stuff in general, and it's just like, bro, all of your stuff is crap. Like, almost 99% of stuff on, like, anti-Masonry stuff is just crap. It's like, and you can just go and, like, talk to a Freemason, and they're like, hella normie, bro. And, you know, there are going to be esoteric ones, and there are going to be some that are dicks. But it's like, if you understand history, and if you understand the structure of Freemasonry, it's just a lot of the conspiracy, oh my god, the Freemason, it's just like, no, it just does not hold water at all. Lua is like a demigod in Voodoo, also called Loa. Okay, yeah, I don't know how. Okay, that's interesting. Like a demigod. Is it somewhat comparable to like a daimon in Platonism, or you wouldn't want to kind of syncretize the two, just keep them as same different things, disparate things? I guess in Platonism they have more of a hierarchy of things, like they have daimones and archons, and they also have gods and demigods, so it would probably be wrong to call it that. Anyway. So, he also mentions the hand-blood zoin decreases its thickness and diminishes proportionally to the distance between the fundamental concentration and the substance and its separated part. So the thread will actually get thinner and may actually just tear over a certain much of time. There's so much terrible, laughable masonry. Yeah, a lot of the stuff on Masons is just laughable. That's interesting, because usually you see, like, the connection of, like, a blood rite as it's permanent forever, even if you reincarnate, your astral bodies are connected forever. And it's like, that actually may not be true, and it may actually wear off. The central purpose of Voodoo is to summon the Loa to possess a medium like a horse to a rider. The blood of an animal is used to feed the Loa. Daimon would be a better word, probably. Okay, so you can kind of cognate it. This Kesdjan reminded me of that. That's interesting. In this, I would say it's almost like the opposite. Instead of getting blood to call something into yourself, it's like we're constructing something that we then pilot after our planetary body dies. That's the kind of, you know, escape from death. We become a perpetual being through time and space even after death. Because Gurdjieff, in essence, his take is on the afterlife is that there kind of isn't, not that there isn't one, it's just that what is even a human? What is an I? An I is almost like a construct, and if you really want to become real, you need to become real before you die, or else you just dissolve back into the cosmic rays, bro. Dan says, my great-grandfather was a Mason, but I never met the guy, but can guarantee through his life and left behind books, it's not that deep. Kind of pagan, though. So, Masonry, here's the thing. If you don't like know anything can become a Mason, it doesn't look like anything. But if you study esoteric stuff and then you look at Masonry, there's surprisingly how much stuff is in there. But, you know, do they know about it? Do they work it? It's like, I remember one take that I heard on Masonry that I found really interesting is Masonry is a continuation of the Arianic heresy. So Arian, A-R-I-A-N, Arian, the Arian Christian heresies. Arian Christianity is, you know, in Christianity, how like Jesus is divine no matter what, and he was born divine, but he's also human, but he's also divine, and you're not allowed to question that nature. In Arian Christianity, the reason why it's a heresy is in Arian Christianity, Christ was born human, and he became divine. And why that's a big thing in Arian Christianity is Christ is the prototype. So if Christ was born human and became divine, then therefore that is a process that you can also do. And so someone had this whole essay on like Freemasonry kind of being this continuation of the Aryan heresies, because it's like there's this Christocentric kind of myth. You know, you got a little bit of Enoch, you got a Mithras, you got some Pythagoreanism there, you got the Hiram myth. What craft masonry and the appendage Masonic rituals are about is this Aryan heresy of trying to get a person and make them slowly divine. So it mimics this Aryan heresy kind of thing. I was like, oh, okay, that's an interesting take on masonry. That's an interesting take on masonry. My dad is a Mason and he's an ultra normie, not a single esoteric bone in his body, says Tyler. So here's the other thing. In Masonry, it's the guys' club, it can be a place for networking, and it can be also something very profound and esoteric. It's not either one of those, it's all three of those things. So you can go in it and you can just be a normie all your life. And I would actually say it's probably better that way, because I don't know, in pure lodges that are just pure esoteric, it's so easy to become a space cadet. But if you have normies there, they kind of ground you. So it's good to have like another esoteric Masonic guy that you touch tips with every now and then. But like on the plus side, it's like if you were a Mason, it would be good to attend a craft lodge and just do the 3 degrees, just be a normie. But then, you know, on the side, you know, you go off to all the esoteric lodges and you do the esoteric stuff, and that's good. And you have an esoteric Mason friend and you touch tips, but also keep doing your normie stuff. That's how I would say in a sense, it's a good system, but I would say I think you should live your life and do hella esoteric things. Like, you know, summon angels, do internal alchemy, and then once you've failed, come back to Masonry and then take it on as that ethical foundation. Like your foundation, you need that foundation. You can get away kind of without it, but you'll kind of need it. And then once you come to Masonry, it kind of is this last thing that clicks into place, and it just kind of settles things for you in that sense. So Masonry is good, and I think it, even though it's in a kind of disrepute, it's kind of coming back, and a lot of people who are joining are people who are esotericists looking for that kind of that ritual. And even, you know, even though that most Masons are just normies, they do respect their rituals, and they have maintained them after all this time. So you still get there. I'm a Masonic apologist. That's what I am. I'm a Masonic apologist. Ironically, I became a Freemason because my grandfather was one. I found Masonry as kind of stepping stone into the occult for the inquisitive. Yeah, and it can be that too. Most Masons are there for networking. Exactly. And Dylan, once again, I plumb. Plumbers hold water. Masons lay bricks. The Knights of Columbus are the arch nemesis of Masons. Roman Catholics engineering made aqueducts and sanitation. Lamau, what? Thank you for the $10 though, Dylan. Thank you for the $10. Plumbers plumb. I don't know, isn't there something in the Masonic thing where it's just like the Masonics, they lay the foundations and then they use the plumb rule to keep things straight so there's no deviation? Like because everyone uses the compass and the square, but they also have in their lodge, they have other symbols like the plumb rule. Anyway, plumbers plumb, bro. Plumbers plumb. Agreed. Networking does seem to be a huge part. Okay, everyone's just talking about Freemasonry in the chat. I'm gonna get back. Death Blaster. I swear I've heard that name before. Let's go back into this. Anyway, talking about hand-bled Zoin. And the second particular property of this hand-bled Zoin consists in this, that when it is introduced into the fundamental concentration of this substance and has mixed with this primordial concentration, it is distributed in it everywhere in uniform densities and in uniform quantities, wherever the given concentration may be, and in whatever quantity this same hand-bled Zoin may accidentally or intentionally be introduced. Very interesting. So this is like... Death Blaster, notice me, senpai. Yeah, who are you, Death Blaster? I swear I've seen your name before. Dox yourself for me, Death Blaster. So this is interesting. Hand-bled Zoin. It seems like he's also... Because there's like this kind of... When I say blood magic, I don't mean like fantasy blood magic. I mean the, you know, Paracelsian healing where if someone's sick, you get their blood and you put it into a healthy animal, and it creates this astral string, and then the sickness, the miasma in their astral body goes into the animal, and the animal gets sick and dies, and the person comes back to life. Like you move the sickness from one person to the other. Seems like if you get someone's blood and you put it into another thing that is a being concentration, the Hanbladzoin in that blood just disperses into that whole nature. So Kesgen blood transfusions. It's like the xanthan gum for the Kesgen body. Yes. Okay, so Gurdjieff has some kind of knowledge of some kind of blood magic here. This is what he's talking about. I hate the term, like, blood magic just sounds so fantasy now. It just sounds so fantasy. And so I know, he's talking about the esoteric significance of blood whenever he talks about Hanbladzoin. Let's get that through our heads. And so, in consequence of the fact that the body Kesgen of the being is coated with those substances, which, in their totality, make this cosmic formation much lighter. So in consequence of the fact, coated with those substances, which in their totality make the cosmic formation much lighter than that mass of cosmic substances which surrounds the planets and is called the planetary atmosphere, then as soon as the body Kesgen, pardon me, of the being is separated from the planetary body of the being, it at once rises according to a cosmic law, Tenekdoa, or as it is sometimes called the law of gravity, to that sphere in which it finds the weight proper to it equally balanced, and which is therefore corresponding place of such cosmic arising. This is very interesting. So you have a Kesgen body, it has a certain quality, a density to it, and when you die, it's like there's a magnet in it which pulls you. You can't force yourself to stay if you do the work. This is something interesting. This is why it's like, where are the masters? Well, they want to connect with you, man, but they're like, the magnet in their Kesgen body has just sucked them up to their appropriate sphere. And this is like in Kabbalah. I remember, I think it's Cordovero says something like, if you study Kabbalah enough, it makes your soul stick to the higher worlds. And this is also where some forms of sex magic come in. Like in the Golden Dawn, W.B. Yeats had the idea of sex magic not as a process of rejuvenation, but like you do it with a woman intending to get her pregnant, but you do some kind of magical operation, and it draws down a high soul from the spheres which can't incarnate normally because it's stuck to the higher spheres. It draws down a large soul and imbues it and incarnates it into a body, and so that your child will be a master. And it's like that's an interesting take. Not sure about that, but it's something interesting that Gurdjieff is touching on here, that it gets lighter. And so when you die, this process just moves you into your place in the cosmos. You don't even have a choice necessarily. It's just automatic. Corresponding cosmic arising. Then in consequence of all this, the preliminary preparation consists in this, that beforehand, still during planetary existence, that being on the body Kesgen of whom it is intended, his decease to produce that sacrament of the sacred Almsnoshino, a particle of his Hanbladzoin must be taken, and this particle must be either kept in some corresponding surplanetary formation or be introduced into those beings themselves who produce this ritual and intentionally blend with the Hanbladzoin of their own body Kesgen. Okay, so here we go. This is really interesting. So if you get a master, so someone has a Kesgen body, they're not a master, they do a very high development, but then you also crystallize other bodies, mental body, which Gurdjieff seems to talk about sometimes, but then he skips it, soul body. You need to have that. Once you're that, you're a master, you're man number 7. Once you have that, you can then thicken the Kesgen body with this process, Almsnoshino, but you need to do it while you're alive. What you do while you're alive is you put your blood into an object, or you do a sacred rite where you mix it in a substance and give it to someone, i.e. your student, to drink. Which makes me think about the Last Supper now that I think about it. Jesus says, this is my blood. Did he literally do a blood rite so his astral body could commune with his followers after he died? Oh my God, it was Jesus' astral body that they were looking at. Oh my God. So I just had a little realization there. Yeah, but this is really interesting. So there may be objects somewhere in the world that are left by masters that have like a small amount of drop of their literal blood on it, but because it has that hand-blood Zoin link, the astral body of the master can communicate with you through the object. So really interesting. Or, you know, if you're in that lineage, you got to drink your master's blood, which may be weird, but this is the reason why they do that. This is the reason why you see some kind of blood rite, maybe, where someone will bleed and put a little bit of their blood in some wine and the person will drink it. It's to tie the astral bodies together. So that maybe you see it with your physical eyes, or maybe your master can then come to you in your dreams. Very interesting. Very interesting. So in this, and this is what keeps the lineages alive, even if your master dies accidentally. Death Blaster, an old friend. An old friend from on high, hey? Oh, Tyler. Last Supper blood rite makes so much sense now. Yeah, thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Tyler. Yeah, it reminds me of the maternal connection, says Fine Free. Yeah, that too as well. Like a mother's connection with her child. Anyway, Last Supper as a blood rite confirmed. Gurdjieff is an esoteric Christian. Let's see, I wonder if Gurdjieff did a blood rite with Ouspensky or some of his other students. You know, when Ouspensky died, one of his students, Rodney Collins, there's some weird thing about Ouspensky dying. Ouspensky being one of the greatest student of Gurdjieff, in my opinion. I love Ouspensky. When Ouspensky died, not many people know this, Ouspensky knew when he was going to die. And he was like, I'm going to die today. Told his family, and he's like, I want to go on a car ride. And he had this crazy student called Rodney Collins. And Rodney Collins and Ouspensky went on a car ride together. And no one knows what happens, because they just went on a car ride. And when they come back, Rodney came back, Rodney jumped out of the car and ran upstairs and locked himself in Ouspensky's study. And when they looked in the car, Ouspensky was in the back and he was dead. And so this is all like Gurdjieff lore. This is fourth way lore. So Rodney Collins stayed in Ouspensky's study for 6 days and 6 nights. I assume he would have had like water in there or something, but he didn't eat anything. And he just supposedly just meditated in there. And people were trying to knock in, and he was like, leave me alone. And when he came out, he was like, I've been in contact with Ouspensky. Ouspensky is a solar being. And Ouspensky has told me I need to go to South America. And so Rodney Collins, everyone was like, what? And Rodney Collins is a bit of a crazy dude. But you know, you read his stuff and he's legit. Rodney Collins is a legit, like, fourth way, like, you know, I don't know if he's like man number 7, but he's got some man number 5 traits for reals. He's got some stuff. And he went to South America and just started teaching there. And that's why there's, like, every now and then you see online, if you look for fourth way stuff, there's this, you'll see, like, fourth way Gurdjieff schools that are, like, kind of Russian, like, that survived the Russian Iron Curtain, and you'll see some fourth way schools that are, like, continental Europe, like the French kind of remnants. And obviously we see the Anglo side, the American-British side, but then randomly you'll see, like, South American and Spanish, like, fourth way translations and books. It's like, what's the deal with that? It's because of Rodney Collins. Rodney Collins made a huge impact in, like, the South American kind of in Mexico, basically. And there's, like, this fourth way kind of and then that when he died there in, like, 1958, I think Ouspensky died the same year as Dion Fortune, 1946, 1 year before Aleister Crowley, which was 1947. I think that's correct. Someone can correct me on that. And then Rodney Collins, so Ouspensky died 1947, Gurdjieff died 1949. Same year as Arnaldo Cromhella, which is weird. Everyone died, like, before 1950. And then Rodney Collins lasted until 1950, where he died, and he died in Mexico. And so after that, like, all of these South American esoteric schools just absorbed a bunch of, like, fourth way teachings into themselves. And so you get some, like, whenever you meet, like, a South American who says they're, like, Rosicrucian or Gnostic or into Hermetics, there's this weird, sometimes they have this Gurdjieffian undercurrent to them, and it's like, that's where it comes from. But anyway, just reminded me of that, because, like, the story of Rodney Collins going there, like, why did he go there? Oh, it's because Ouspensky could communicate with him, and Ouspensky was a solar being, and there's this weird thing. It's like, what? And it's Rodney Collins is like a kind of a dirty name. I think a lot of fourth way people are like, oh, he's delusional. But I know when I hear his story, I'm like, I don't know, man. There's something weird and esoteric about Rodney Collins. Anyway, me, Rodney Collins apologist. Let's move forward. So, in this way, when the three-brained perfected being designed for this sacrament, I need an intro episode, lol. I'm frequently lost. So Gurdjieff was the guy who taught. Gurdjieff's best student, in my opinion, was Ouspensky. Ouspensky taught Rodney Collins. And Ouspensky died in, what is it, in England? He moved to England and started teaching the English groups. Gurdjieff died in Europe, I'm pretty sure. And Rodney Collins went to Mexico and died in Mexico. Although Rodney Collins had a mysterious death. He, was in church or something, and he went to a cathedral, and he went up to the highest tower, and then he fell off the highest tower. And when they, found his body, they're like, yeah, he died of a heart attack. I'm like, So, Rodney Collins died very sus way. Very sus way. I almost feel like saying a black magician killed him. But once again, I don't want to get too schizo. Now, so perfected being can do this for sacred Almsno Shino ceases his planetary existence, and his Kesdjan body is separated from his planetary body. Then, thanks to the first particular property of this being handled Zoin, that connection begins to be established about which I have just told you, between the given body Kesdjan and that place where the particle of his handled Zoin was preserved beforehand, or those beings who intentionally coated this particle into their own body's Kesdjan, yeah. So you can do the blood right, and you can tie your astral bodies together, or you can tie it into an object, and which you then use in a ritual and your master comes to you in a vision. So interesting. Oh, makes me wonder. So Gurdjieff had a lot of, there are a lot of other fourth way, after Gurdjieff died, a lot of the other fourth way lineages did a lot of crazy things. So Orage was in America and he did his own thing. J.G. Bennett took over Europe, and I think he met Idris Shah, who turned everyone Sufi, and then J.G. Bennett himself went into Subud, which is hilarious. That's a bit of an off tangent. And then, everyone has their own kind of lineage coming off of that. But there's all these other interesting people that pop out of that from every now and then. Maurice Nicole is another one that's interesting. So, Gurdjieff and Ouspensky are the two big ones. But, Rodney Collins and Maurice Nicole are really interesting. Maurice Nicole was a student of Jung, and something was just kind of missing, and he found Ouspensky and was like, this is it, and left Jung. And then through Jung, he actually met and connected with Gurdjieff, and he's also kind of like a forgotten fourth way teacher. But it's like, he's this other guy who's very interesting. And then there's Fritz Peters. Fritz Peters is the most mysterious one. Fritz Peters was like a small boy, and him and Gurdjieff just connected. And it's like bros, and him and Gurdjieff just they would play chess together at night. That's where Fritz Peters gives us all these weird stories. But Fritz Peters is also a weird name in the Gurdjieff communities. They all kind of stand back from him. And there's something, I'm not sure where the record comes from, but there's some record where Gurdjieff looks at Fritz Peters on his deathbed and he says, I apologize to you. And Fritz is like, why? And he says, I've ruined you. And Fritz is like, what? And Gurdjieff basically tells Fritz something along the line, paraphrasing, he says, what I've given you is too much, and now you're too developed, so whatever group you go in, it will destroy it, kind of thing. It's like everyone's insecurities, everyone's inconsistencies will just be made prevalent. No one will be able to lead a group while you're there in the back. It's like you kind of... You're just going to have to do it alone. You can't be whatever group you try to connect to, it's just going to create problems. And it's like, really? And then, so Fritz just kind of disappears. But then every now and then there's a fourth way teacher will seek him out. and there's like talks of him like a fourth way group will like, what's the story? It's like they'll meet like somewhere like under a bridge at midnight, and the guy will be like, yeah, I connected with Fritz, and they like Fritz comes out as an old man like in some period, and he'll like give them teachings and then just kind of disappear in the background. He like disappeared in the background of fourth way history, but it's like, it's one of those things that's like who achieved it and who didn't. J.G. Bennett, I'm kind of dubious about Bennett. I don't think he achieved much just because of the Subud thing. No offense to Subud people, but like definitely Ouspensky, definitely Maurice Nicole, Rodney Collins. Like I'm their fanboys, and then like Gene Salzman, Orage probably did some good things. I need to read Orage. I've got one of his books. I don't know much about him honestly, but he's got his own take and own version of stuff. And then like Fritz Peters is, I like how I bet it's more that I want him to be someone developed. I'm like, yes, Fritz made it as well. But anyway, there's all these kind of people, and it makes me wonder, like, is this like just a romantic thing? Like, if we all code our higher being bodies, and when we like die, is this principle here, the Tenek Doa process, is this just going to magnetize us all together, and we're going to like magnetize into a celestial sphere together, and we're all going to like meet and high five, even though we're separated and we're all connected by memes and the internet? When we die, will we all meet each other? Will we all meet each other in that same sphere? Who knows? Who knows? It's just a romantic notion. I'm just a dreamer. Anyway, moving on. Today has been Tangent City. Okay. So the Kesgen body, which has arisen to its corresponding sphere, and the other end of which stays either within those surplanetary formations, in which the particle from the general mass of the Handblazoin of the given body Kesgen was fixed, or, yeah, that's the good ending, or those beings who intentionally blended the Handblazoin with the given body Kesgen with the Handblazoin of their own body Kesgen can exist in space only for a limited period, namely only until the completion of the appointed movement of that planet. Okay. On which the given being had arisen around its sun. Hold on a second. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I think that's, if a master does that chain with you, and then you die, it's still lost, so you need to reach that level and then do it to someone else, do the blood rite with someone else to have that lineage still going, or else it just gets lost. Really glad I have tuned in for this delightful conversation. Thank you. No problem. Fine. No problem. And hopefully you people in the future watching as well also feel the same way. It includes all of you future watchers as well. And at the beginning of such a new completing movement, the said thread completely disappear. Yeah, so that's, yes. So maybe doing the blood rite and putting it into an object is better, but anyway, there's just different techniques, different ways to do it. And they disappear because in the atmosphere, surrounding all planets, or maybe not even the objects thing works, the evolution and involution of cosmic substances required for the great cosmic Trogo-Auto-Ego-Crat, in accordance with the fundamental sacred cosmic law, Heptaparaparshinok, which is the law of Heptaparaparshinok, the law of 7. The Trogo-Auto-Ego-Cratic law is the law of reciprocal nourishment, so everything is connected. Everything feeds off of everything else. Again, commence flowing only for the Trogo-Auto-Ego-Cratic process of local character, i.e. within the limits of the given solar systems, what is called own activity, and in consequence of which all, without exception, of the cosmic substances which happen to be in the given atmosphere during the period of this movement, and among them the said connections also are immediately transformed into those cosmic substances which must be present in these atmospheres. So, my boy, another checkpoint. We should be getting close to the end of the chapter. Until these completed movements have come to an end, those beings existing on the planet who either have in themselves a particle of the Handblazoin of any Kesgen body, or have at their disposal the surplanetary formation in which the part of the hand-led zone was fixed, can assume, of course, that they have all the corresponding data for carrying it out, at any time attract such a body back to the sphere of the solid part of the planet, and saturating it to the condensation corresponding to their own hand-led zone. In this way, establish relations with the reason of that already completedly formed independent cosmic unit. So there we go. So you can reconnect with the reason of a departed individual through this process of the blood rite using the hand-led zone. And this attraction, or as it is sometimes said, materialization, is produced, as I have already told you, by means of what is called valikrin. That is, by the conscious injection in a certain way of one's own hand-led zone into the ends of one of these connections. Okay. Lots of blood rite going on here. Several times, even before this Tibetan case, this sacred process Almsnoshino had already been produced on your planet by the three-centered beings of different periods, and about the information concerning these sacred processes of former times, several legomenisms existed. Legomenism is like a secret teaching that's sacred, but it's like embedded in something. Like an art piece, which you show normies, and they're just like, ha ha ha, funny, it's a comedy, but it's actually an esoteric play that if you have the right knowledge, you can glean from it esoteric knowledge. But it can be a play, it can be architecture, it can be a painting, it can be a poem. A legomenism can be literally any unit of culture. It can be a meme that is a vessel for something esoteric. So, but it's a specific teaching that's clothed. So it was through these legomenisms also that this small group of Tibetan beings already knew all the details of the procedure relating to this sacred process, and of course, they also knew about the need of the special preliminary preparation for it. But having now no other possibility of learning all the secret sacraments except only by attempting to enter into relation with the reason of their deceased chief, they decided to carry out this sacred sacrament upon the body Kesgen of their former chief, even without the said preliminary preparation. Okay, and they didn't even prepare it, so they're like, oh, fuck. So, owing to this risk of theirs that proceeded there, which served as the cause of the mentioned great misfortune, as my further investigations showed me, this great misfortune occurred in the following way. When these 6 great initiates, still existing with their planetary existence, begin by twos, when these 6 great initiates, still existing, their planetary existence, by twos in turns, uninterruptedly for 3 days and 3 nights, to produce upon the planetary body of their former chief the process valikrin, that is the inpouring of their own hand-led zone into his body. So they put their own blood into a dead body to try and connect to the astral body of their deceased master. Tangent City describes any conversation we have ever had. Yes, Steph Blaster, yes. Then, because of the absence of the said preliminary preparation of the connection with his body Kesgen, their hand-led zone did not go to the actualization where it should have gone, but only accumulated chaotically over his planetary body of the former chief. And since, unfortunately for them, during these same days, a reinforced blending of the sacred active element Okidanok was proceeding in the atmosphere above that locality, or as the beings say there were great thunderstorms, then between these 2 cosmic results, still only in the process of transition from one definite cosmic phenomenon to another, are what is called subrionolian contact resulted. So they were all struck by lightning during a blood ritual? And it was thanks to that contact there, on that small area of the ill-starred planet, that that accelerated cosmic phenomenon called Norton Ich Tono, that is to say, a sudden instantaneous evolution of all cosmic formed crystallizations, and namely all the neighboring surplanetary formations, were immediately transformed into the prime source substance Aetherocrylno, So a lightning bolt is just straight up ether electricity transmutation, lol. This Sobranolian contact, or as it would be said on your planet Earth, this explosion, was so powerful that during this Norto Nictono, there everything without exception was transformed into Etherokrylno, both the planetary body of the chief and this small group of beings, as well as all the 6 other brethren there who had completed the sacred sacrament, and likewise in general all the spiritualized or only concentrated surplanetary formations which were in the given region within an area of 1 shmana, or as your favorites would say, 1 square kilometer. Okay, so they did some alchemy and atomic blasted themselves out of existence, basically. To the 4th dimension, but real quick. Just boom. Wow. Among these destroyed formations, reproduced both naturally as well as artificially by the beings there, were also so this is a tragedy. So their main teacher died, then the 6 masters around that guy died, and also a bunch of their books, which belonged to these 7 terrestrial genuine great initiates, and other things which had served as means for keeping in memory everything concerning all the 3 genuine sacred individuals intentionally actualized from above, and namely Saint Krishnatkarna, Saint Buddha, and Saint Lama. Now, my boy, I think the sense of these words of mine will appear clear to you, by which I defined the significance of this charming military expedition, and namely, when I said that this great misfortune, not only for the beings of the given country, yet perhaps for all the 3-brained beings of the whole planet. So this is something interesting, because Tibetan Buddhism has spread across the world, or Buddhism has left from that mountain. The Lamaism has left from that mountain, but if only it had contained its true teachings, it could have helped the rest of the world, but it doesn't. And that's something very controversial, because we like to see it as like Tibetan Buddhism is this esoteric Buddhism that's changing everything, man, and you just got to get initiated into Jogsen or Mahamudra or Kala Chakra Tantra, and then that's it, boy. Just throw out your native esotericism. That's all dead. You know, Tibetan Buddhism has the real lineage, where when you look at Gurdjieff is saying no. Gurdjieff is actually saying no. That even they have suffered some degeneration. And a lot of things have been lost. And if you look at Tibetan Buddhism, I don't know, man. Some of their lineages are a little bit dubious. Some of them even argue with each other, like, you were taught by a demon, and then one guy's like, no, it was, the spirit of Buddha, or like, oh, I found a teaching of the Buddha in a terma. A terma is like a hidden teaching, like hidden in a statue or something, or it's just sealed somewhere in nature. I found this teaching of Buddha. Buddha, an original teaching of Buddha that's not in the sutras. And like, a lot of their esoteric stuff is just that. And you know what it is? Straight up? Bon sorcery smuggling. A lot of the Bon tradition just straight up got smuggled into Tibetan Buddhism, and that's all it is. It's not, Tibetan Buddhism isn't perhaps Buddhism. It's Bon sorcery, which is still based, I see that as still based, but based on what? Now, my boy, I think the sense of those words of mine will appear clear to you, by which I defined the significance of this charming military expedition, and namely, when I said that this was a great misfortune, not only for the beings of the given country, yet, perhaps also, for all the 3-brained beings of the whole of that planet. And so, my boy, it has now become clear to you how there on your planet, all the 5 religions I named still remaining there, at the present time, and which were founded on the teachings of 5 different genuine saints, sent to the 3-brained beings from above for helping them to free themselves from the consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer. And for those who don't know, the Kundabuffer is, you could say, the source of ego. So we all got addicted to Kundabuffer, and now we need to dissolve it. You once described the film Sucker Punch as legomenisms. Yes, the film Sucker Punch is definitely is esoteric. It is. It's all about like hot girls delving deeper and deeper into their psychology and slaying their inner demons. How, although all these 5 regions have gradually become changed, thanks, as always, to the same conditions of ordinary being existence abnormally established just by them until they were eventually turned by any sane mentation into children's fairy tales, yet nevertheless these 5 religions still served, for some of them, as a support for these inner moral motives, owing to which during certain previous periods their mutual existence became more or less becoming to 3-centered beings. But now, after the final destruction of even the last remnants of these religions, it is difficult even to foresee how it will all end. The last of these 5 religions, namely that founded on the teaching of the genuine Saint Lama, has been finally, and even with a crash, destroyed by the charming military expedition of theirs. And I mean, you know, China hasn't helped, well, burning of temples and killing of lamas hasn't helped, you know, Tibetan Buddhism spread at all. I mean, it spread Tibetan Buddhism out of Tibet for sure, but, you know, that probably didn't help either. The last but one, namely that founded on the teaching of Saint Muhammad, they are now destroying by means of the abolition of former famous fezzes and yashmaks with the gracious assistance of the German Junkers. And as regards the final destruction of the still earlier arisen religion, namely that founded by the teachings of Jesus Christ, that is the religion and teaching upon which the highest individuals placed great hopes, the contemporary 3-brained beings there, who have already become arch-strange. This is what aliens think of us. They look at us and they're like, bro, what the hell is wrong with us? We are not just strange, we're arch-strange. Are completely destroying it by organizing in the city of Jerusalem their university for the contemporary Jewish youth. The religion founded on the teaching of Saint Moses, although it existed for a long time and is still maintained after a fashion by its followers, yet owing to the organic hatred formed in the beings of other communities towards the beings who follow this religion, due only to the maleficent idea existing there called policy, infallibly, sooner or later, they will doubtlessly croak it as well, and also with a crash. Oof. And finally, so Gurdjieff is just like, they're gonna die one day. And finally, as regards that religion there which was, so to say, founded on the teachings of Saint Buddha, I've already told you that thanks to their notorious suffering based on a misunderstood idea. So I'm not sure if Gurdjieff is correct in this. I think he's missteering like a stringent fakirism for a kind of Buddhism, and extreme forms of Zen for Buddhism. But this, once again, it's only what he can come into contact with, that he can kind of judge. And, you know, he was living in what, you know, late 1800s, early 1900s, so R.I.P. Gurdjieff would have loved the internet and all the esoteric PDFs we have nowadays. They have, from the very beginning, turned this teaching into a means for their own, as they themselves say, mental perversity. By the way, it must be noted that in the beginning, the Tanguri, and after them Brahmanists, Shuinists, and so on, occupied themselves with this mental perversity there. And now, at the present time, those called Theosophists and other pseudo-learned occupy themselves with the same thing. So he doesn't look too fondly on Theosophists, which I should say, Theosophy has also gone through different periods. And, I don't know, nowadays, a Theosophist may be someone who's very New Agey, or actually someone who is quite learned. But it should be noted that back in the day, when Theosophy got really big, there was a bit of a golden age, and just a lot of middle-class people had like money and time, and a lot of them just became Theosophists and read theosophical works and just all faffed about. And, you know, would go to spiritual talks and be like, oh, but I heard. And, you know those kind of people. And it's like, that's what he's talking about when he's talking about pseudo-learned people. Like, it's those kind of people who, like, you know, go to a yoga class once and then, like, then we'll go to a serious meditation Zen retreat and be like, oh, yeah, I know what's being said, don't worry. Like, that's who he's railing against. Having thus spoken, Beelzebub became silent for a short while, during which it was seen that he concentratedly pondered over something, and afterwards he said, At this moment, I'm considering that it will be very, very useful for your reason if I tell you more about a certain event, connected also with the sacrament of the sacred almsnoshino, which concerns the sacred individual, the conception of whom was actualized among your favorites, who having become formed was named Jesus Christ. All right, JC in the chat. I will tell you about this important event connected with the actualization among them of this sacred individual, the notion about which the contemporary favorites of yours define the words death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Let's see Gurdjieff's hot takes. Your acquaintance with this factor will be another example for enlightening you about the sense and essential significance of the sacred sacrament almsnoshino. And in addition, you will also have a clear example of what I have already told you, how thanks only to the strange inherency in their general psyche called wiseacring. So we always wiseacre instead of thinking properly, we wiseacre. The sense of even those crumbs collected from bits here and there into one whole, spoken and indicated to them by the genuine sacred individuals intentionally actualized among them from above, were already so distorted by the first generation of the contemporaries of the given sacred individuals that from all what they could call religious teachings, information reached the beings of subsequent generations, suitable perhaps only for inventing of what are called childish fairy tales. Thank you, Gurdjieff. He's already gone through this, but he went through it again. The point is that when this sacred individual, Jesus Christ, was actualized in the planetary body of a terrestrial three-brained being, and when afterwards he had to be separated from his exterior planetary coating, then just the same sacred process, almsnoshino, was also produced on his body Kesdjan by certain terrestrial three-brained beings, in order to have the possibility, in view of the violent interruption of his planetary existence, of continuing to communicate with his divine reason, and of obtaining in this way the information about certain cosmic truths and certain instructions for the future, which he did not finish giving them. So this is the whole thing. So it's correct. We were on the right track. It's Jesus' Last Supper was a blood rite, and his resurrection was this process that thickened his astral body, so he could then, his reason could then connect to his initiates, his disciples, his apostles, and that they could get the rest of his teaching, which is where you get all of these different books, then all these different old ancient Christian traditions and lineages, and some very interesting Gnostic sects, where you'll see, the Apocryphon of John, which is the secret book of John. So in the Bible, you have the book of John, and then you have the secret book of John. So there's the teachings of John while Jesus was alive, and then there was the teachings of the resurrected Jesus. And the book of Peter is the other one. Yeah, book of Peter? Well, there's a book of Philip. Book of Philip is a big one as well. Or is it James? Book of Philip is the one where Jesus and Mary Magdalene kiss. And yeah, that was the one that supposedly the Knights Templar found. And we're like, what? Book of Philip. Secret Book of John is important. There's a bunch of, I think there's like a Secret Book of Mark. I could whip out my Nag Hammadi library and start reading them again. God, just Hypostasis of the Archons rocks. Rocks or socks. But yeah, there's a whole, and there is a, I think there is a Book of James as well, isn't there? And the Gospel of Thomas is that's a very Gnostic one. That's the one that Jung really likes. Anyway, let's go. The information concerning this great event was accurately noted by certain participants in the performance of this sacred process, and was intentionally related for a definite purpose to the ordinary beings around them. And so, my boy, in consequence of the fact that period of time coincided with a particularly sharp functioning, which I already once mentioned, of the strange reason of these three-brained beings, pleasing to you in the sense of the periodic ekbarzia. Whoa, I love that metal band, it's crazy. Which had long been in an inherent need for them to lead into error beings around them similar to themselves. Bro, now that's a tendency. The periodic ekbarzia is the tendency that humans have to lead into error beings around them similar to themselves. Literally like online trolls. Literally confirmed. At which point, period, many of them strove to be called learned, of course, of new format, and also on account of the fact that at that time, there were many such beings among the mentioned ordinary beings around them. Then they inserted for transmission to subsequent generations in most of the notes and expressions of those stories of the witnesses about his sacred process such absurdities that in addition to the indubitable information that Jesus Christ was crucified on a cross, and that after the crucifixion he was buried, they also proved just as convincingly that after his crucifixion and burial, Jesus Christ was resurrected and continued to exist among them, and to teach this and that, and only afterwards did he raise himself with his planetary body to heaven. So, Gurdjieff is denying the resurrection. He may be an esoteric Christian, but he's definitely a heretic. Gurdjieff heresy confirmed. The result of this kind, in objective sense, criminal wiseacring of theirs, was that in the beings of... So he's not rejecting the resurrection, he's just saying, like, you crystallize higher being bodies, and then those higher being bodies can thicken, so when your actual planetary body dies, the thickened higher being body can be seen by your students. I mean, it still succeeds over death. The teaching is still kind of there, but he's denying the necromantic resurrection of a physical planetary body. Wiseacring of theirs was that in the beings of subsequent generations, genuine faith in all this divine and uniquely accomplished teaching of salvation of the all-loving Jesus Christ was totally destroyed. Alas, these absurdities, which were written down, began gradually to engender in the presences of certain of the beings of subsequent generations the impulse of doubt, not only concerning what I have just said, but also doubt relating in general to all the real information and accurate instructions and explanations of this sacred individual, intentionally actualized among them from above. The data, however, for the doubt of these mentioned certain terrestrial three-brained beings of subsequent generations began to be crystallized and became an inalienable part of their common presences. Gurdjieff predicts new atheism, confirms, chiefly because even in them, in spite of the process inherent in them of almost automatic existence, yet nevertheless during a long period of time, many of their centuries, and they gradually acquired from this automatic crystallizing data for a more or less correct instinctive sensing of a certain cosmic truths. As for instance concerning the indubitable truth that if the process of sacred rascuano occurs to any being, or as they say, if someone dies and is moreover buried, then this being will never exist again, nor furthermore will he ever speak or teach again. And so, those are these unfortunates in whom, in short, there will still continue to proceed very slightly the functioning of being mentation according to the law of sane logic, and who had not at all accepted such illogical and unusual incoherencies, ultimately lost all faith in any truth whatsoever, really given and explained by this sacred individual, Jesus Christ. And as regards the remaining terrestrial, three-brained beings. How many pages left do I have? Okay, let's keep going. Who, by the way, in general represent in themselves the majority, then they becoming usually transformed at the corresponding age owing to many causes, but chiefly because already from the earliest years of their existence, it became proper to them to occupy themselves with what is called mordorten, into what are called psychopaths, accept blindly, literally and word for word entirely without any being logical mentation, all these fantastic absurdities. Yeah, so you either become an atheist or you become a psychopath, which reached them, and a kind of special peculiar faith in all this religious teaching becomes automatically performed in them, as if it represented in itself the totality of all the truths connected with and related to just this sacred individual Jesus Christ, who was indeed intentionally actualized among them from above. The information about what is called the Lord's Supper, given in the noted totality, still existing today among your contemporary favorites, representing, as it were, the real accurate history of the sacred individual, and which is called by them the Holy Writ, was nothing else but a preparation for the great sacrament Almsnoshina on the body Kesjan of Saint Jesus Christ. So yeah, once again, Gurdjieff, heresy, denying the resurrection, yes. It is interesting to notice that even in this totality, noted from bits here and there, which your favorites call the Holy Writ, there are many precise words and even whole phrases uttered at the Lord's Supper by the Saint Jesus Christ himself, as well as by those directly initiated by him, who in this same holy script are called disciples, or apostles, and which words and phrases your favorites, particularly the contemporary ones, also understand as always and everything, only literally, without any awareness of the inner meaning put into them. And such a nonsensical, literal understanding proceeds in them, of course, always owing to the fact that they have entirely ceased to produce in their common presences Parkdolg duty, which should be actualized by being efforts, which in their turn alone crystallize in the three-brained beings data for the capacity of genuine being pondering. That is why, my boy, this donation is brought this program by the Knights of Columbus. Check out your local Catholic church for more information. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you for the Catholic propaganda. Let's go. Let's go. In the given case, also, they could not ponder, at least, only about the fact that when this sacred individual, Jesus Christ, was actualized among them, and when this same existing holy writ of theirs was compiled, so many definite words were not used by being similar to these compilers as are used at the present time. They do not consider that at that period, being mentation among the beings of this planet was still nearer to that normal mentation, which in general is proper to be presented among three-brained beings, and that at that time the transmission of ideas and thoughts was in consequence still what is called Podobnisirinian. Ooh, I think I got that. Podobnisirinian. I think I got that. Hail to the Lord. Or as it is still otherwise said, allegorical. Yes. In other words, in order to explain to themselves or to others some act or other, the three-brained beings of the planet Earth then referred to the understanding of similar acts which have already formerly occurred among them. But meanwhile, this also now proceeds in them according to the principle called chain on isirones. And this first proceeded there because, thanks as always to the same abnormally established conditions of ordinary being existence, their being mentation began to proceed without any participation of the functioning of their what are called localizations of feeling, or according to their terminology, feeling center, chiefly in consequence of which this mentation of theirs finally became automized. And hence, during all this time, in order to have the possibility of even approximately making clear to themselves or explaining anything or to anyone, they were themselves automatically compelled and continue to be compelled to invent very many non-significant names for things. Hold on a second. And also words for ideas great and small, and therefore the process of their mentation began little by little to proceed, as I've already said, according to the principle of chain on is zero net. Bro, are you trolling me? Many nonsensical names for things, also words for... Yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks, girl. Yeah, okay. Okay. And it is just with this mentation of theirs that it's like he's doing it to overload that faculty, because it's like you just can't hold on to everything at once. And it is just with this mentation of theirs that your contemporary favorites try to decipher and to understand a text written still in the similnicerian manner for the mentation of beings contemporary with the divine Jesus Christ. And so, my boy, come on, we're getting to the end. I can feel it. It is necessary to explain to you about a certain fact in the highest degree absurd, in the objective sense blasphemous for a greater clarification of the real nothingness of this holy writ, still existing today among your favorites, which apropos became particularly widely spread after their last process of reciprocal destruction, in which, as you already surmise, there is everything you please excepting reality and truth. I will inform you, namely, concerning what is said in this contemporary holy writ, which has, as it were, reached them in an unchanged form, about the chief, most reasonable, and most devoted of all the beings directly initiated by the sacred individual, or as they would say about one of his apostles, Judas. Judas. There it is. I guessed it. This devoted favorite apostle, initiated by Jesus Christ himself, was called Judas. Judas, baby. Judas, let's go. According to the present version of this holy writ, everyone who wishes to draw on the true knowledge will acquire such a conviction, which will also be fixed in his essence, that this same Judas was the basest of beings conceivable, and that he was conscienceless, double-faced, treacherous traitor. But in fact, this Judas was not only the most faithful and devoted of all the near followers of Jesus Christ, but also, only thanks to his reason and presence of mind, all the acts of this sacred individual could form that result, which if it did not serve as the basis for the total destruction of the consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer in these unfortunate three-brained beings, yet it was nevertheless during 20 centuries the source of nourishment and inspiration of the majority of them in their desolate existence, and made it at least a little endurable. Judas was the basest indeed. In order that you may better represent, so Gurdjieff is totally a Gnostic here, represent and make clear to yourself the genuine individuality of this Judas and the significance of his manifestation for the future, I must first still inform you that when the sacred individual Jesus Christ intentionally actualized from above in a planetary body of a terrestrial being completely formed himself for a corresponding existence, he decided to actualize the mission imposed on him from above, although the way of enlightening the reason of these three-brained terrestrial beings, by means of 12 different types of beings chosen from among them, and who were specially enlightened and prepared by him personally. And so, in the very heat of his divine activities, surrounding circumstances, independent of him, were so arranged that, not having arrived out of his intention, i.e., not having time to explain certain cosmic truths and to give the required instructions for the future, he was compelled to allow the premature cessation of the planetary existence to be accomplished. He then decided, together with these 12 terrestrial beings intentionally initiated by him, to have recourse to the sacred sacrament Alms Znoshinu, the process of the actualization of which sacred sacrament was already well known to all of them, as they had already acquired in their presences all the data for its fulfillment, so that he should have the possibility, while he still remained in such a cosmic individual state, to finish the preparation begun by him for the fulfillment of the plan designed for actualization of the mission imposed on him from above. This is really interesting, because also, how would Gurdjieff have viewed Paul? Because that's one criticism of Christianity. Christianity isn't Christianity, it's Paulianity. Like, there's the four Gospels, and then there's everything written by Paul. which is like 80% of the New Testament, really. And so it's kind of like, you know, they were all in on it. Judas was in on it. He was the highest among them. All the other apostles also had actualization. They also had Kesdjan bodies. But what did Paul have? Was Paul, and because there's scholarship done on Paul nowadays that it's like he was a part of some like weird Kabbalistic Merkava cult, and he just became a Christian and did that thing where he smuggled in his own tradition. And so, you know, Paul has a lot of stuff. You know, a lot of people like Paul, and yeah, I'm not saying that Paul didn't have wisdom, but it could be that, I know Gurdjieff may have like, no, that's actually something else. Paul is a Hasnamusian that like mixed in to Christianity, all these other things. That's very interesting. Very interesting. And so, my boy, when having decided on this and being ready to begin the preliminary preparation required for this sacred sacrament, it then became clear that it was utterly impossible to do this, as it was too late. They were all already surrounded by beings called guards, and their arrest and everything that would follow from it was expected at any moment. In my opinion, Paul did not develop a Kesdjan body, says Marshall. Quite possible, but I don't know. In his places, there is like esoteric stuff of him going to the seventh heaven, and in this, it's like, you know, if he did have Merkava teachings, it would have been the equivalent of Kesdjan body, but from like a different lineage. Or maybe he's like a Hasnamusian Kesdjan or something. And it was just here that this Judas, now a saint, and formerly the inseparable devoted helper of Jesus, who is hated and cursed owing to the naive non-reasonableness of the peculiar three-brained beings of your planet, manifested himself, and rendered his great objective service, for which terrestrial three-brained beings of all subsequent generations should be grateful. This wise, onerous, and disinterestedly devoted manifestation taken upon himself consisted in this, that while in a state of desperation on ascertaining that it was impossible to fulfill the required preliminary procedure for the actualization, the sacred Almsnoshinu, this Judas, now a saint, leapt from his place and hurriedly said, I shall go and do everything in a way that you should have the possibility of fulfilling this sacred preparation without hindrance, and meanwhile set to work at once. Having said this, he approached Jesus, and having confidently spoken with him a little, he received his blessing and hurriedly left. The others, indeed, without hindrance, finished everything necessary for the possibility of the accomplishment of this sacred process, Almsnoshinu. After what I have said, you should now without any doubt understand that the three-brained beings of the two types indicated by me on the planet Earth, which has taken your fancy, have distorted for their various egoistic aims all the truths to such an extent that about this Judas, now a saint, thanks to whom alone such a blessed hearth of tranquility from their desolate existence had arisen and existed for them for 20 centuries, there has been crystallized in the presences of the beings of all subsequent generations such an unprecedented, unjust representation. I personally even think that if this Judas was presented in their holy writ as a type of this kind, then it may have been for this reason, that it was necessary for someone or other also belonging to the mentioned types to belittle in this way for certain purpose the significance of Jesus Christ himself. And namely, he appeared to be so naive, so unable to feel and see beforehand, in a word, so unperfected that in spite of knowing and existing together with this Judas, so long he failed to sense and be aware that this immediate disciple of his was such a perfidious traitor that he would sell him for 30 worthless pieces of silver. At this point in Beelzebub's tales, he and all the passengers of the intersolar system ship Karnak suddenly sensed in their organs of a taste, a special sour, bitterish taste. This signified their ship was approaching that place of their destination in the given case of the holy planet Purgatory. That's really interesting. So instead of a message with a female voice being like, destination incoming, everyone just gets a taste in their mouth. Like, oh, I just had a sour candy. That means we're getting close. Lol. They sensed the sour bitterish taste because a special magnetic current was released from the steering compartment of the ship to inform the passengers of the approach to the place of destination. Okay, that's a really cool little sci-fi addition there. Beelzebub therefore interrupted his tale, glancing affection. So he doesn't actually say what Judas does or what happens to Judas. Tail, glancing affectionately at his grandson, said, "Now we shall have willy-nilly to stop our talk about this sacred individual, Jesus Christ. But nevertheless, my boy, when we arrive home and exist on our dear Caratus, remind me sometime when I am free to finish telling you about the whole of this story in detail. All the history of the actualization of this sacred individual in a planetary body. Among your favorites, both concerning his existence among the beings of various groupings of this planet of yours, and also concerning his violent end, is very, very interesting, just for you who wish to explain to your reason all the details of the strange psyche of these peculiar three-brained beings. And it will be very instructive and interesting to know that part of the history of this Saint Jesus Christ, which relates to the period of his existence there from the ages of 12 to 28, according to their time calculation." Woo. Oh my God. We made it, everyone. We made it. That was almost 4 hour chapter. Jesus. So we learned all about religion there, which was interesting. There was a lot of interesting stuff there. And next, and this is a special chapter as well. Chapter 39, Holy Planet Purgatory. Nice shirt, says Tyler. Thank you. 9/11. I just threw this on for today. This got bought for me as a joke, and I wear it around the house, but sometimes I forget I'm wearing it, and I like go out to get something at the shops, and some people are like, what the hell is that guy wearing? Anyway, yeah, thank you everyone who came along. It's definitely, if you stayed for this, next week is the important chapter. This chapter, the Holy Planet Purgatory, is the most important chapter in the entire book. So you'll find out next week. But thank you all. Thank you everyone in chat. Thank you everyone, and thank you for everyone who donated as well. We'll be reading same time next week. For me it's 10 a.m. when I start, but we'll be here next week. Chapter Purgatory is huge. God, I read it back in the day. Wasn't this chapter only like 50 pages or something? But we'll get through it. We'll get through it, even if we got to do it in 2. Same time next week. Same place next week. I'll see all of you then. Thank you so much. If you want to help support the channel and help support these efforts, please consider donating one time via PayPal. Maybe becoming a member, a YouTube member. Haven't shilled that in a while, have I? Yeah, and thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone who just stayed that 4 hours. Jesus Christ, Tyler and Marshall and everyone else. Woo! You guys are the Chads. Still in a state of confusion, but I vibe, says Dan. Sorry, Dan. Look, I don't know, look at Fourth Way Explained video. Maybe watch a couple of my other vids. But yeah. 72 pages, Jesus Christ. Okay, maybe we'll do that in we'll have to do it in 2 parts. Woo! Okay. I love all of you. I love all of you guys. I'll see you next week.